What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto died alone in the forest, but was reborn with the soul of the first demon? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. If there ever was a clash of the titans, it was in Konoha. For 7 days and 7 nights a demon laid siege on the walls of the village hidden in the leaves. Kyuubi, the Terror King himself, attacked Konoha after rising from the depths of Makai with his 8 clansmen, who each went to attack a portion of the shinobi-infested world. Under his hellfire, the vast population of Konoha was slain and the dwindling shinobi that were left took up arms against the juggernaut of the demon, and even with their combined forces nothing could stop his terrorizing raids. However, that all stopped when the Yondaime, himself, rode in on his trusted summon Gamabunta, the King Toad. Even though he was the only man who had ever been considered an equal to the fabled Professor Sandaime by his fellow shinobi, he could not defeat this demon. Their battle shook the land, and the vast forest surrounding the once lush land was now either in flames from Kyuubi's hell torrents or charred after fire was extinguished by Gamabunta. Finally, on the 7th day, after much blood, sweat, and tears, the Yondaime caved into his darkest fear, attaching the very soul of the fox to the innocent soul of a child. Deep inside, Yondaime knew that Konoha wouldn't respect his wishes, much like Orochimaru didn't honor Sarutobi's wish from him to Hokage rather than the former student, and blamed the innocent child for the loss in this battle. Truly, this child was being punished more than Kyuubi himself, so Yondaime altered the seal. There was no true way to kill that which is already dead, so Yondaime figured a way to send Kyuubi back from which it came, but not before leaving something precious to him. All the chakra of a village or even the world was going to be locked within this child, as some sort of divine intervention from karma. Kyuubi was going to live an afterlife tortured by those he had tortured while in power, and this child was going to live a tortured life for holding his demonic essence from the said demon lord. However, it was for a good cause, because without his chakra the Kyuubi couldn't return to the human world, or at least not anytime soon. It was better than the alternative, Yondaime concluded as he finished this new seal. At least the child would be able to protect himself if the villagers ever felt too out of line, and Kyuubi would get what he so rightfully deserved in the end. And with those thoughts, Yondaime charged with child in hand and sealed the world's greatest menace into a child. 7 years later, he had that dream again. Just like before, Naruto relived the last thoughts of the man who had sealed him with his cursed blessing. Bittersweet really, because without the man's kindness he wouldn't be here right now after a villager lost himself to his hatred and attacked him disguised as the old man. It had all started when he had come home after being attacked again in the grocery store, and after returning to his rundown apartment after paying double the price for spoiled goods, Naruto noticed his door was unlocked. So hiding his food, he waited for the man to jump out. Thinking, it'll all be over soon, and if I don't move maybe he'll leave my food alone thinking I'm dead. But when the door squeaked open, Naruto saw only his most trusted person on this planet, Sandaime Sarutobi. After some small chit-chat, Naruto found something was off, and that's when the imposter sprung his trap, and in one quick motion, Naruto's neck was slit and all he heard was, "You deserve this," before he fell back. However, death never came, nor did the cold ground, for as soon as Naruto started to topple backward something snapped inside of him. More precisely, the protectorate seal around Kyuubi's pent-up chakra slipped to save his life, and now before the world stood the sole proprietor of the Biju King Kyuubi chakra. It wasn't long before Anbu showed up, albeit late as hell after discovering the location of the chakra spike. But they arrived at the scene of the attempted murder only to see Naruto standing over a sniveling man. Even with the mass killing intent radiating off his body, the child stood complete calm and totally curious of what was happening. Within the hour, the man was sent to the psychiatric ward to be analyzed for any mental affliction, before being prosecuted for attempted murder, even with most of Konoha going against his case, stating something along the lines of, he was probably attacked, but with Sarutobi's urging or threatening, he was prosecuted and found guilty but was released under the claims of being mentally insane. Kyuubi's, or rather Naruto chakra, broke the man's psyche, and he was now spending the rest of his days in a padded white room, replaying the shock of having the equivalent of a Holocaust victim's hatred for his torments going off in his mind after being multiplied 1,000 times over. Well, revenge is a dish best served cold, they always said, and this guy was going to spend his whole life over this cold heaping of hate in front of him. But even with that problem solved, the aftermath from it sprouted more problems and more grievous than the last. What will Naruto do now that he had access to the greatest source of power on this planet, and how would the villagers react now that he held the power of their most hated foe? And the most disturbing of all was, would he help the village that constantly held a knife to his throat and be their loyal protector, or would he turn his back on the village that shunned him like Orochimaru did years before? Sandaime found himself in the proverbial pickle and now had to make a choice. Either let Naruto be and watch the boy struggle from afar before he either killed himself and the village from the immense backlash that Kyuubi's chakra would have sent out when released, or watch him turn his back on the village before swearing annihilation on all of its inhabitants. Therefore, Sandaime made a third choice and broke his own oath to never train another student. So Sandaime gathered his almost infinite resources and got the boy a well-secure home and began teaching him basic chakra control. It wasn't long after that did the, for lack of better term, dreams start. It was like watching a movie and remembering parts you have never seen. They looked so familiar, and yet Naruto had no memory of ever being in the place he saw, which usually was centered on a land with red skies and large, old Japanese castles. After telling the Sarutobi of his dreams, the man immediately told him to tell no one else, thinking of the horrors that the villagers would do to the child if they found out he could remember what Kyuubi had done while still breathing. Standing by his oath, Naruto trained vigorously until his 7th birthday, when he convinced the Hokage to let him become a shinobi. It was both a joyous and painful thing for the elder man, because Naruto would be swearing his loyalty to this village, but then he was reminded of his other apprentice. Orochimaru was once loyal, but power soon corrupted him and he turned his back on the village, so the question was, would Naruto do the same? Shaking his fears away, Sarutobi remembered it was Naruto's choice and holding him back would only hurt the boy's trust in him, so the Sandaime let Naruto join. So this is where Naruto found himself after his little daydream on the past few years, in a classroom with people he had only met the day prior. His training with the Hokage forced the lonely boy to grow up fast, and behind his cheery attitude to throw the villagers off their tracks and show them that they could break him, was a boy who analyzes every situation as if his life depended on it. So here he finds himself going over his mental notes he had taken on everyone around him. First was the pink-haired girl who was in front of him. Haruno Sakura, preteen girl with preteen fantasies on the village heartthrob. After only one day, Naruto made a conclusion about her: stay away. Not that the girl was ugly or anything, on the contrary, she was quite cute and would be a beauty one day. But her helpless infatuation with a certain boy would only slow him down. Aside from her open love life, Sakura seemed like she would make an excellent kunoichi if she paid more attention to her training than boys, but then again she was only preteen girl-like. Yamanaka Ino, the second person who caught his eye in the class, blonde like him. The pretty girl would be simply stunning like Sakura, but she also fell under the category of do not pursue, seeing as she too was smitten by a certain male. Unlike her friend, who had kind eyes, Ino had the calculating brain like all the seers in her family of psychic shinobi. From his intel from the Sandaime, Ino may very well be the strongest kunoichi of her generation at the time, and the look in her eyes didn't dissuade that notion. Moving on, Naruto's eyes fell on the last female of his class, Hyuga Hinata. The cute girl was pitifully shy, but under her shaking voice and uncertain eyes was that of a true beauty like the other kunoichi noted before, and being the heir to the Hyuga household and fearsome Byakugan, it was ironic that she was shy and uncertain, unlike her prideful clansmen. It was that trait that made her stand out, and from what Naruto discovered from previous meeting with the Hyuga household, that the Smug clan was by far some of the most intolerable people he had ever met. Hinata was different though. She didn't have her all-seeing eyes on preteen boys like the other girls, but instead they were on the ground. Given her heritage, she could be the strongest academy student if she would come out of her shell a little, and maybe even strongest genin given her parentage, but fate was cruel. Moving his eyes from the girl beside him, Naruto looked onto the male population of the class, starting with the sleeping child beside him. Nara Shikamaru was a lazy bum at first glance, but as Naruto observed him longer, he noticed that the true reason he came off like that was because he was just not motivated to pursue this career. The most ironic part about it was that underneath the lazy cover was a true shinobi genius just waiting to come out, but too bad if he was too lazy to dig it out. Moving on to the slightly larger child beside him, Naruto rested his gaze on Akamichi Choji. The class, fat ass, was far from the glutton he made himself out to be, sorta. He was an Akamichi, and with that came the burden of being larger than everyone else, but with it came his true advantage, size. Within him came the potential to be the strongest genin, physically, in the whole class, and if he ever grew over his self-conscious problems he would truly be a deadly force. Looking up, Naruto's gaze landed on the class animal lover, Inuzuka Kiba. The class clown and animal lover was a true beast on the inside, and his taijutsu showed it. During the classroom spar, he crushed a no-name kid within seconds using his clan's techniques and gloated about it afterward, reducing the boy to tears. His pride would be his downfall, but if he survived that encounter, Kiba would become a true shinobi down to the core, and with his loss of pride, he would be a valuable asset to the village. Next was Aburame Shino, quiet as a mouse, but had an aura of the strong silent type. He was quiet, conserved, and calculating like most trained shinobi, and could be a bingo book candidate in time. But his only downfall was his isolation, and other than that there was not much Naruto could say about him. Moving his gaze to the last person on his list of standout faces, was the village tragedy story and heartthrob Uchiha Sasuke. Not only was he the only heir to the Sharingan in the village, but he was also far more advanced than an academy student should be. Example being able to use a Gukakyu, Grand Fireball, during a ninjutsu exam, scorching the target and most of the wood around it. He was why, but Naruto had to give it to him. He had been in the first place seat so long that he could be, but Naruto was here to change that. Uchiha Sasuke just made a rival, and his name was Uzumaki Naruto, called Amino Iruka as he called rolled. The man's expression changed to one of hatred as he called the name, but Naruto wasn't affected. He had far better things to do than worry about those who had nothing but hate for him. Here, was the boy's nonchalant reply as class started. Naruto sat in the back of the classroom out of habit, and because the elevated view provided the best spot to collect intel, not only from his sensei but from his classmates as well. Even before he got settled in, the boy's danger sense, which he had grown over the years to test a person's tolerance level for him, was going off a mile a minute. Smoothing the invisible creases in his deep blue pants, Naruto felt his black shirt growing incredibly hot under the teacher's gaze. Shifting his blue vest that was over his black shirt, Naruto tried to play off his nervousness to the unbearable imaginary heat. The class rolled on like usual, and Uzumaki found himself victim to Iruka's deep resentment. Apparently the young man had lost his parents to the Kyuubi attack, leaving him orphaned. The young Chunin was a bit more than bitter that Naruto, or more exactly, the Kyuubi vessel, was favored by the Hokage himself rather than left out in the cold like all the other orphans. Throughout most of the dry history lesson, Iruka made periodic attacks at Naruto's intellect with questions far above an academy student's level. The class, who was usually asleep by now, was fully aware of the battle of wills going on between the new kid and their sensei. After answering a particularly difficult question, Naruto silently thanked Sandaime for pounding into his head that this was the age of espionage warfare and information was the sharpest sword. Iruka was stumped after a mental game of cat and mouse, so the older man decided that he would just quit trying to defeat the child mentally and go on to the physical level, because there hadn't been anyone in the last half-decade that was this well-informed in the mind and gifted on the battlefield. So after filing the children out of the class, Iruka made his way down to the training patch and started the exercises. It was simple, the children would work on the basics and Iruka, as their sensei, would point out their mistakes if any. However, the one child that he wanted to humiliate proved to be a prodigy in the works. Even though Naruto studied under the Hokage, in both chakra control and all the information a child could possibly need in shinobi life, Naruto was never taught anything that he could physically use in combat. Maybe because of the deep guilt that Sarutobi had buried in his heart over his estranged pupil, or if the older man didn't want to tempt Naruto to follow the said student's fall from favor, but all the Sandaime armed Naruto with was a quick wit and understanding of chakra, and from there, it was up to Naruto. So needless to say that Naruto was not the sharpest shot with a kunai, unlike the Uchiha prodigy. Iruka wasted no time to point out Naruto's mistakes in a rather loud manner. After a bit of teasing at the blonde's expense, Naruto corrected his hold on the kunai, and within a few tries, his accuracy was steadily catching up with the class star. Taijutsu wasn't any better than accuracy training. His stance was poor, and compared to the prowess of the more gifted students, Kiba, Sasuke, Shino, and Choji, Naruto's abilities weren't nearly up to par. This was painfully made apparent to Naruto when the Akamichi male almost pounded Naruto's head into the hard earth with his Buben Baika no Jutsu, partial multi-size, fist. For the duration of the fight, Naruto was either using his speed advantage to land sloppy blows to the larger boy, or use his agility to dodge the earth-moving punches. Either way, Naruto couldn't win the fight, only to hope for a draw at best. Watching the blonde, Iruka couldn't help but feel a little bit guilty. He had pitted the boy against a student who had a distinct advantage. Unlike Choji, Sasuke, Kiba, Shino, or any other student for that matter, Naruto did not have parents, or in one case a high-class scroll, to teach him the finer points taijutsu. Naruto instead stopped dodging and let out a breath, as he was already formulating a plan. Old man always said that the chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and right now I have two. The accuracy can be solved with more practice, but the taijutsu will need some guidance. But who will teach me? Old man is out, and besides him I really don't have any other options. I could try to, but before Naruto's mind could pull together a plan, Iruka decided to end today's lesson with a ninjutsu test. Since Sasuke was last the day before, it was Naruto's turn to go first. Blinking in surprise as Naruto's thoughts focused on the task at hand, the boy walked toward the stationary training logs that had been battered by Choji, slashed by Kiba, turned to sawdust by Shino courtesy of the Kakaichu insects, and burnt to a crisp by the Uchiha savior, of course. Walking up to a less battered post, Naruto could hear the other students in the background. Ignoring the other students' whispers, Naruto focused his chakra into the only gift that he had received in his life. A chakra pentacle used by his father as a good luck charm was the only thing that Naruto received out of an act of kindness. Sandaime had been the one to give the gift, was also left with the burden and responsibility of telling the boy the truth. The truth that he was the son of the late Yondaime. Unlike the Sarutobi head's prediction, Naruto didn't go on a bloody rampage and kill countless Konoha citizens for their acts against him, but instead the boy thanked him for not keeping the truth from him. It appeared as though the incident had brought more than just a physical change to the child. Naruto had mentally matured for more than any child his age as well. To him, if this village meant enough to his father for him to give his only born son for it protection, then that was more than enough for him to try and follow in the same footsteps. So now Naruto stood before his classmates holding the five-pointed amulet, focusing his chakra into it. Poising his arm forwards, Naruto said aloud, "I will only say this once, so pay attention. This is my Charka Shaku, chakra weaver." And with that, a long extension of charka shot out from each of the 5 points on the pentacle. 1. Chakra Shaku. Degeki, chakra weaver. Strike. Naruto said as he dashed towards the wooden post. The wisps of chakra that formed from around the pentacle's point closed around Naruto's clenched fist before he made contact with the wood. The log's top was ripped from the ground by the punch that had left the bottom in a perfect flat edge. As the log flew backwards, Naruto gathered his chakra towards the center of the chakra shaku before saying, 2. Chakra shaku. Tama, chakra weaver. Shot. The built-up chakra released in a solid burst, flying straight through the log before releasing a shockwave that literally broke down the larger portion of the log before firing it back at Naruto. The children surrounding Naruto watched in awe and shock as the new kid's jutsu just destroyed a 200-pound training post. The most affected was none other than Uchiha Sasuke himself. How does he just come up and pass me like that? I'm an Uchiha, Konoha's elite, the strongest. How is he so much like? But before Sasuke could finish his thoughts, they were cut off by the sound of Naruto being bombarded by the shrapnel from the destroyed log. Iruka was about to jump in and protect Naruto, but it seemed that the younger boy already had it covered. Letting the compressed chakra in the center of his chakra shaku flow outward, Naruto redistributed his energies throughout the pentacle. Linking the edges of his chakra beams, Naruto spread the chakra in a thick sheet across the connected pentagon. Chakra shaku. Tate, chakra weaver. Shield, was all Naruto said as the pieces of wood collided with the shield before being disintegrated by the jutsu. Dropping his throbbing hand, Naruto smirked as he looked at the Uchiha. It was worth it, knocking that arrogant smile off his face, Naruto thought to himself as he bid back the urge to hold his chakra-burned arm. The three moves, each inspired by Konoha's three Sannin, Chakra Shaku. Degeki was from Sandame's stories of Tsunade and her monstrous strength, and after hearing how much the abilities help or hurt them, Naruto knew that he had to make his own version. The Chakra Shaku. Tate was inspired by Jiraiya and his uncanny ability to make his hair into a living shield. And after being at the receiving end of the villagers' mistreatment, Naruto figured it would be wise to develop a defensive jutsu. Last, the Chakra Shaku. Tama was inspired by the last Sannin, Orochimaru. Even though he is Konoha's greatest villain, Uchiha Itachi being a close second, he was by far the greatest ninjutsu user the village had ever seen. For instance, his Seneashu, hidden shadow snake hands, had killed masses of shinobi, both of Konoha and other villages, without them coming within 3 meters of his body. So why have the idea of leaving a superior ranged jutsu out of your arsenal just because it reminds you of your enemy? But these techniques didn't come without a price, and seeing as Naruto was nowhere near the skill level of any of the three, he paid a steep price. When used back to back, they channeled so much chakra through Naruto's arm that he wouldn't be able to use the arm again until the ruptured tenketsu healed, which was normally a day or so thanks to the regenerative powers Kyuubi's chakra had left him with. Walking right past the Uchiha, and making sure to keep his tender arm as still as possible, Naruto met eyes with him for a slip second to tell him that the bet was on, before joining back with the class without waiting for his reply. Needless to say, that infuriated Sasuke, along with his groupies, and just made Naruto somewhat of a hero to the male population of the class. Now Naruto went from being to the new kid, to being the cool jutsu kid. Therefore, for the rest of the class he was pestered with questions like, "Can you teach me?" "No," was the answer he gave each time, and like all the others they left him labeling the boy as an ass. So the class fell back into a normal atmosphere, sorta. Now that Sasuke was glaring daggers at Naruto, instantly making him evil incarnate in the majority of the female class book, and as for the boys, only those who didn't care about being a ninja, or those who just didn't find his abilities a threat to them, tolerated the boy. The rest just didn't want anything to do with him after he wouldn't let them in on his jutsu. Class ended without anyone attacking Naruto out of anger, and Iruka held Naruto back as the class left. The ones Naruto labeled his tolerables lifted an eyebrow to Naruto before leaving. Turning to face Iruka, Naruto prepared himself for a verbal assault on where he learned the jutsu, or that they had there on him, the demon spawn. But to his surprise, Iruka simply bowed, before saying, "I'd like to apologize for my behavior earlier. Even though Hokage-sama had told the village there was no reason to fear you, but sometimes it takes falling on your face to see what's right in front of you." Looking up, Iruka could make out a little behind Naruto's usual happy mask and see the shock on the lonely boy. The world had dealt a harder blow to the boy in front of him than himself. Seeing as Iruka had known his parents for a while and was just ignored by the villager, but Naruto never met either of his parents and was known as Konoha's demon. Needless to say that Naruto was shocked, but he hid it behind his smiling mask. Iruka could see small segments of the boy who put on a face for the village, and felt even worse. Therefore, doing what he always did when he was feeling down, he decided to go for ramen. Inviting Naruto to come with him, Iruka didn't expect Naruto hastily reply. "Of course, Iruka-sensei," the boy yelled, dropping his mask, but with as quick as it fell it was back in place, and the only proof that it even fell, it was the red tinge on Naruto's cheeks. Following Iruka out of the class, Naruto couldn't help but feel the villagers' eyes on him, but he persevered. Arriving at the ramen stand, Naruto wasted no time in robbing Iruka on his weekly pay. Grimacing at his growing financial problems, Iruka tried to make some small talk to take his mind off of the thought of bread and water for a week. "So Naruto, how did you get so good at ninjutsu? Come to think of it, you did use hand seals to activate your jutsu. How did you do that?" Iruka asked, but immediately regretted it when he saw Naruto's expression change. "So he didn't want to be my friend after all," Naruto thought sadly as his eyes drooped. Looking in retrospect, Iruka was mentally handing his ass to himself, when Naruto abruptly turned his gaze to the man. All thoughts of comforting his estranged student vanished from his eyes under the boy's gaze. It was like fire burning, all-consuming, and eventually the boy's eye smothered Iruka under its anger. Only when Iruka felt the full, crushing weight of his mistake was when Naruto decided to leave. Naruto, who had been forced to run for his life over the years that he grew up, had developed a sixth sense. It, or rather his chakra, flooded the area, keeping a constant check of the surrounds and alerted Naruto if anything, other chakra presences and killing intent, enter the area. Combine it with his anger and the effect was increased tenfold. And for once the villagers or self-righteous shinobi didn't bother Naruto because of one frightening fact. Kyuubi's or rather Naruto chakra was boiling over and spilling over into the surrounding area. The usual sedated presence of his chakra was almost lashing out on the surroundings as if it were trying to let out some of the anger raging inside its host. Walking the dank alleys of Konoha to avoid hurting any of the citizens of the village and reaffirming their belief that he was the demon seed, Naruto grew increasingly irritated at the presence following him. Thinking the mystery man was Iruka, Naruto lashed out with his chakra shaku, not caring that his arm was screaming bloody murder as his chakra shot through it. Loading a powerful chakra shaku tama that was aimed slightly to the side so that it would just scare Iruka off rather than obliterate his body. However, to his surprise when Naruto made eye contact with Iruka, it wasn't Iruka at all. For that matter, it wasn't a man at all. Before him stood the timid Hyuga Hinata who like always had her eyes on the ground. Calming his nerves, Naruto disassembled his chakra shaku and lowered his arm. Clutching the throbbing arm, Naruto mentally berated himself while holding the demonic chakra at bay. Last thing I need is the Hyuga in my ass for harming their heir, Naruto told himself while thinking of the consequences of Hinata seeing Kyuubi's imprisoned chakra. Hinata took a few hesitant steps to the wounded boy, hoping to soothe him and maybe convince him to help her. She was weak, that much she admitted to herself, but she was tired of hearing it from her family. She was tired of seeing the disappointment in her father's eyes and she was tired of seeing herself alone. Not stopping when Naruto's piercing, cat-like gaze met hers or when the feral growl he let out as a warning for her to stop, Hinata slowly reached into her pouch and, careful not to make any sudden movements, pulled out the healing salve. Specifically made by the Hyuga clan, the salve could heal ruptured tenketsu at a remarkable pace, which was needed because more often than not, an advanced Jukin technique would almost destroy the chakra holes beyond human repair. Rubbing the cream onto the pained skin, Hinata felt Naruto calm down while the cool goo did its work. Uttering a thanks, Naruto quickly backed away and was about to leave when he heard Hinata's voice. "Wait," the girl said, trying her best not to stutter. Standing straight and tall, she looked into Naruto's curious eyes before speaking. "I'm Hyuga Hinata, heir to the Hyuga clan." Naruto simply nodded and was about to take his leave when he was stopped again. "And I wanted to know if you would," and thinking that it would be just like before, Naruto was about to snap when he heard Hinata finish. "If you'd be my friend," and with that, the shy Hinata's words were out in the open and a confused Naruto was left in front of them. The anger seemingly vanished and looked into the girl's eyes. Watching her eep and turn her gaze was all the confirmation Naruto needed to know that her offer was genuine. It baffled Naruto to think that the Hyuga heir wanted him as a friend, but after seeing the look in her eye, Naruto's soul instantly connected with hers. She knew the pains of being ostracized because of her birth. Unlike him though, she was expected to be the greatest the village had to offer while he was expected to betray them in a cold, demonic fury. They both failed to realize that expectation and were persecuted for it, and it was at that moment that Naruto made the connection, and with that sudden epiphany Naruto thought, maybe having a friend is better after all. Naruto was about to tell Hinata of his decision, when the long silence became too much for the girl and, with shimmering eyes, she was about to make a break for it when Naruto said, "I guess having a friend won't be too bad." Looking up, Hinata saw past the bad sarcasm and saw behind the smiling mask that Naruto put on for the sake of the village. Looking at the softly smiling boy, she smiled too, and that was the start of a lifelong friendship. It's been 5 years, Naruto thought to himself while he sparred with Hinata. Time sure has flown, the boy thought to himself while weaving through Hinata's deadly and accurate Jukin, gentle fist, strikes. Looking at the determined look on the girl's face, Naruto couldn't help but let his mind wander. Funny how 5 years ago, Hinata was too scared to even think about having that type of look on her face, Naruto said to himself while holding back a laugh, which came out more like a sort of strangled chuckle, which in turn only served to deepen the scold-like look on the girl's face, causing her to redouble her efforts. Much had changed in the 5 years after the fateful night that Naruto made his first friend, and as cliched as it sounds, Naruto's life seemed to brighten from that point on. Even with all the drama he went through inside and outside of the academy, ignoring both the ignorant villagers who couldn't see his pain and Iruka's attempts to befriend him, Naruto soon found himself spending most of his free time with Hinata, just exploring the town, and like a good friend, Naruto found out that Hinata was having trouble at home because they thought she was too weak, so Naruto decided that they could train together so that way, everyone would benefit. What seemed like a good idea at the time turned out to be a horrible idea, at least in Naruto's opinion, when he finally got Hinata to let out her inner shinobi after a speech that slapped some sense into the kind-hearted girl. "This isn't a game, Hinata. You, your comrades, and your village could all be lost if you don't have the resolve needed to do what you have to. Yes, it is good to be kind, but there is a time and place for all things, and the battlefield isn't a place to be kind. So you have to make a choice. Either give up on being a shinobi or harden your resolve and show me what you can do." Those were Naruto's exact words on that day. Hinata finally stopped hiding behind her own inferiority complex and let her real self shine after that. From that point on, it had only been uphill for the girl. With Naruto's help, she was able to master the Jukin she had been taught, and with the help of the closet prankster, she was able to steal some of the more advanced Jukin scrolls without the main family finding out. Taking a note from her partner's playbook, Hinata decided to work on her own techniques instead of basing her whole arsenal solely on just what she was taught. Researching everything on chakra that she could find, Hinata couldn't find any inspiration for a new jutsu until she saw Naruto use his chakra. It wasn't the chakra shaku or its variations that caught her eye, but the way his chakra seemed to constantly overflow from his body and act as an early warning system. From there on, it was a domino effect as Hinata figured out a way to release her chakra in a similar field that surrounded her hands. The field acted like her personal Jukin amplifier, and the results from her first test were shocking. In a family spar, Hinata used the amplifier on every finger and was able to effectively use Jukin from all of her fingers and close Tenketsu with the slightest touch. Needless to say, Hanabi was quickly defeated with the newly dubbed Jutesaki, gentle fingers, and the turmoil growing in the Hyuga household subsided, for now at least. Naruto, on the other hand, got more than he originally thought he would get out of this friendship. Hinata, being the friend that she was, taught Naruto some of the basics to a good taijutsu form, like a stable base and hands in a ready position. But Naruto refused to learn Jukin when the girl offered, saying, "Jukin is your family taijutsu and I doubt I'm ready to join your family, Hinata." The mere implication left Naruto smirking, and Hinata beat red before the girl got Naruto back by closing a few well-placed Tenketsu points, freezing the boy right where he was standing. From the hints that Hinata gave, Naruto used what he was naturally given to form his own taijutsu style that, much to his surprise, came out to be a lot like the Hyuga's Jukin. But unlike the Hyugas, Naruto didn't have the Byakugan, so he used his overflowing chakra as a screen that reacts to both chakra and killing intent inside its set area. Using this screen, Naruto was able to strike using the overflowing chakra to code each of his blows. When used, it had a few surprising effects. One being able to distort anyone trying to mold their chakra when his chakra-coated fist came too close to chakra trying to mold. This had a particularly vexing effect on Hinata, who found it increasingly harder to use her family's taijutsu when Naruto could just cancel it out by simply bringing his fist near hers. The other effect was rather cool, or so Naruto thought. Because it was his chakra that was constantly flooding the area around him, Naruto had a limited control over his natural chakra element in the area, or specifically the air that was in his chakra's territory. After a little practice, Naruto was able to make airstrikes in the area without molding the Junshu chakra, territory chakra, but just guiding it with something like a kick or punch. It went extremely well with Naruto's new taijutsu form, which he named Hake, Kenshoken, 8 divinations, striking fist, after its parent style Hake, Jukin. Nevertheless, true to his kitsune nature due to the after effects of his binding to Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto developed a way to mold his overflowing chakra, Junshu chakra, so that it could cover the area with a genjutsu. After that same development, Naruto began to work with the genjutsu field until he was actively able to disguise the whole area with regular bunshin, which in turn stopped Mizuki from embarrassing him in class because he couldn't compress his chakra into a bunshin. Back to the ongoing duel with Hinata, Naruto found himself being pummeled by Hinata's jutesaki and used his hake Kenshoken to distort her tenketsu closing attacks before hitting her with a double-handed open palm strike, and then used his Junshu chakra to push the girl back and stun her for a second with a mass amount chakra overflowing her system. Watching the girl lose control of her chakra within seconds, Naruto sent a pulse through his Junshu chakra, effectively blinding the girl's Byakugan, before making a hasty retreat. Shaking the spot from her eyes, Hinata looked around for Naruto, before swearing silently when she could find him. All-out assault is the only way I can beat Naruto, Hinata thought to herself before scanning the area for Naruto's Junshu chakra. Sighing when she couldn't detect it, Hinata knew that Naruto was probably setting up some type of trap outside the range of her Byakugan. Originally, Naruto's Junshu chakra proved to be more of a hindrance when fighting Hinata's Dujutsu, because even with all of its benefits, it was like a homing beacon for Hinata's eyes to zone in on. In order to counter that, Naruto began experimenting on ways to make his constantly overflowing chakra less noticeable. In the end, he began to let the chakra blend with the natural chakra that every living thing gives off. Now what started as a hindrance is now an effective weapon against all Dujutsu. Naruto could now almost completely hide his presence to the Byakugan, and if Hinata got too close to beating him, he could flare up his Junshu chakra and blind the girl while making a quick escape to regroup. Watching from the Byakugan's blind spot, Naruto knew that even with his chakra completely concealed to Hinata, that if she saw his body, she would spot him and his plan would be ruined. Closing in on his prey, Naruto could practically taste the girl's anxiety. Good, she can feel my presence, but can't find me, Naruto thought, mentally applauding the girl, before springing his trap. Flaring his Junshu chakra, and blinding the girl before molding the surrounding chakra into an area affecting genjutsu. Hinata was surrounded by darkness, and knowing Naruto, he probably had double-layered the genjutsu so that everyone on the outside would only see the trees surrounding them. Steeling herself, Hinata bought some time for herself by saying, "Dirty trick, Naruto. I swear if I find you I'll show you how much Jukin can hurt." Waiting for Naruto to reply, hoping his voice would give away his location. "Come on Hinata, you can do better than that," Naruto said, but to Hinata's dismay, his voice came from every direction. Scrunching her face, Hinata used her chakra like Naruto's Junshu chakra in hopes that she could dodge his attack. But right as Naruto entered her small zone, she knew he was moving too fast for her to counter or dodge. Expelling chakra from her body, Hinata made a silent vow to finish learning Kaden to stop something like this from ever happening again when Naruto suddenly stopped. With his illusion wavering, Naruto had little time to bring up a pulse in his Junshu chakra to blind Hinata so he could make a clean getaway before a heavy pressure gripped his head. It was like someone had his mind in a vice grip. It didn't take long for Naruto to figure out who it was, and when the realization dawned on him he muttered a mental, "Ino," in a pain-filled voice before he heard, "the one and only," as the pressure doubled. Watching as his genjutsu fell, Naruto looked at the last member of his opponent's team, and was pissed to see that the pink-haired girl was able to crack his genjutsu in such a short time. The two girls had originally swore not to talk to Naruto, but after hearing only good praise from Hinata, and seeing how much the girl had grown, they revised their earlier verdict. Both came to Naruto and Hinata's little sparring group in hopes to get stronger and maybe catch Sasuke's eye, but that soon changed when they found themselves too tired to even think about the boy. Within the first week, they both were wearing weights like their two friends and actively participating in new methods to use their chakra to suit their needs. Sakura, with her near-perfect control, quickly picked up some of the genjutsu she had gotten from Hinata, who in turn swiped them from the Hyuga library while she got the advanced Jukin scrolls. The only thing keeping her from using them were her small reserves, so Naruto took it upon himself to raise everyone's reserves including his own. This led to them doing a set of brutal water walking and tree climbing drills that not only raised their chakra reserves but also their stamina. Now the drills were used as a warm-up for the day, and Sakura had more than enough chakra to use the more advanced genjutsu. Ino on the other hand, stuck with her family jutsu but used them in more inventive ways. With increased reserves and control over her chakra, Ino began experimenting with different ways to use her mind-related jutsu. The result was the ability to create a link with anyone within her target range that couldn't put up a barrier to block her probing. The jutsu, Omoi Baraiji, Mind Bridge, link allowed her access to another person's mind, with her leaving her body, but it sacrificed her ability to actively control someone. So instead she fell back on her psychology classes with her father and learned to use a form of gentle persuasion. Another side effect of the link was her ability to attack the person's mind by creating pressure from kicking up too many thoughts at once. With the three girls' combined powers being used against him, Naruto knew that he was about to be screwed when his chakra pulse fell, giving them an opening to attack. But as soon as he did, a shadow swept over him protectively before pulling him back under its dark grip, breaking Ino's connection with his mind. Shaking the remainders of Ino's chakra-induced headache away, Naruto turned to Shikamaru and said with a smirk, "What took you so long?" And the boy then said his catchphrase in response before turning to his lifelong friend Choji and nodding. It looked as if they had a plan, and by the looks of it, he was going to like it. Creating another genjutsu with his Junshu chakra, Naruto knew that Sakura had sensed it and turned to Shikamaru, who was hiding with him, nodded, which signaled that step 1 was complete. Turning to Choji, Naruto smiled when the larger boy, who surrounded his body with chakra, waited for the girls ready to give them the surprise of their lives. The two boys didn't want to join Naruto's little spar group until they started seeing Ino's progress. The girl was starting to act strange, or at least more strange than usual. She talked of Sasuke less, and she was beginning to nag them less on their material things and more on training. Therefore, Shikamaru's analytical mind couldn't take not knowing anymore and decided to investigate while bringing Choji along too. From there they were hooked and stayed ever since. Much to the elder Nara's surprise, Shikamaru actually took his training a step further and asked his father to help him train. The shocked older man couldn't help but nod his head in confirmation before teaching his son some of the finer points of shadow bending. For someone so lazy, it was surprising that Shikamaru picked it up quickly and was now able to transport through his shadows, and do much more than just make his opponents mimic him when he got a hold of them. Choji, on the other hand, wasn't too thrilled about working so hard without being able to eat his chips, but after the first few days he got over it. Especially when he started losing some weight and attracting some attention from the opposite. The once big-boned child was now just a bit bigger than his lithe friend Shikamaru and had picked a new way to use his family techniques. Instead of bloating his body to increase the strength of his blows, Choji took a left from Naruto's chakra shaku Degeki and used his chakra to surround his arm in a bloated fist shape, increasing his strength to one even higher than Naruto's. Feeling his genjutsu start to crumble, Naruto signaled to Shikamaru that the girls had taken the bait, and instead of waiting for Sakura to break the genjutsu, they had Choji come barreling out in his protective cocoon of molded chakra. Instantly recognizing the revised meat tank, the girls jumped out of the way, knowing how much damage the rolling ball of chakra could do. Normally a kid, with the exception of Naruto, didn't have the reserves needed to produce enough chakra to support something like that, but ever since Choji started training, his reserves were only second to Naruto's. It turned out that the calories he soaked up while eating chips did hold chakra, but now that they were gone, they left his body more room to store chakra without having to burn the calories to obtain it. Looking up, Shikamaru mentally patted himself on the back as the plan fell together. Looking at the girls' shadows, lengthened now that the girls had jumped into the air, exposing them to more sunlight, Shikamaru connected his shadow with theirs as they approached, capturing them without causing too many injuries. Naruto and Choji then moved into the checkmate position, as Shikamaru called it, while Shikamaru struggled to hold the girls. Once done, the girls knew that they lost and admitted defeat. "Why does this happen every time?" Ino yelled to no one in particular while stomping the ground. "Our strategy was perfect. We attacked and subdued Shikamaru and Choji while Hinata held off Naruto until we could all take him. Why didn't it work?" Ino yelled. Choji, who had taken a liking to the girl, was trying to pacify the infamous Yamanaka temper. Sighing, Ino conceded to the boy's wishes, much to his pleasure, but still demanded an explanation, which Shikamaru supplied. "It was simple. I anticipated your move and we let ourselves be beaten, before coming to Naruto's aid and setting a trap for you. It fit perfect really. Knowing Sakura's natural ability to detect genjutsu, we set it so that she would come to the genjutsu we set as bait, and when was cracking it we attacked, catching you totally off guard, Shikamaru said. Apparently not seeing Choji making signals for him to shut up. Not paying any mind to the growing killing intent coming from the girls, Shikamaru went as far as to say, "You know, being that predictable will be the death of you," but then realized what a jam he was in. Naruto and Choji were long gone and he was face to face with three pissed off and bloodthirsty kunoichi. After about 10 minutes, Naruto and Choji crept back after the killing intent disappeared. There was an ominous air-over area they had christened Shikamaru's Hollow, after their POW comrade. When they entered the clearing, they saw the three girls all sitting intently watching the boy squirm against the ropes that tied him to the tree. As Naruto's Junshu chakra filled the area, the blonde winced when his chakra came in contact with Shikamaru's. From the feel of it, Hinata had closed some of the most painful tenketsu on the boy's body, and from the far-off look on his face both boys shudder as they thought, Sakura's genjutsu. Moving to help their friend, both boys were surprised that the girls were fine with them helping Shikamaru instead of trying to stop them, and they wisely kept their mouths shut. After releasing the captive boy, Shikamaru began his recap on what happened, starting with Hinata disabling him before Ino battered his mental defenses just enough for Sakura to place a genjutsu on his mind. Apparently the mere though of the genjutsu reduced the boy to a shivering pile of mush, and only increased the fear, respect Naruto and Choji had for their female training partners. Dismissing the meeting, all parties left to their homes sore. The Ino, Shika, Choji trio went the opposite way that Naruto and Hinata went, as they all lived on the opposite side of town. After saying his goodbyes to Hinata, Naruto settled at his favorite ramen stand, and ordered a large bowl before thinking about what had happened that day and the past 5 years. "We've grown," was all Naruto could think at the time while taking a long slurp of his ramen. "The graduation exam is tomorrow and I know we will all pass," Naruto said, mentally smiling, but hiding it under his public face. The next day, it had been the same as before. Naruto had had another vision from a place he had never been, but was completely familiar with. This time he had been in a bedroom, much grander than his. The deep crimson bed set complemented gold foxes statues and paintings that decorated the room. As he seemed to fall asleep, a knife was placed to his neck. The assailant was a masked female with deeply tanned skin that was covered with short soft black cloth that looked strangely like the ninja gear the more elite females wore. There was a little unheard chit-chat between him and the female that no matter how much Naruto tried to hear, he couldn't. And as the masked went in for the kill, Naruto flipped her on her back, before unmasking her, and that's where the dream ended. Waking up in a sweat, Naruto looked at his clock and loudly cursed when he saw he was already 5 minutes late. At school, Iruka had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach. Naruto had never been this late before, even when he came in with new cuts on his legs and arms that he couldn't hide behind his clothes, but still tried to hide them from his classmates. The exam was almost over and Naruto was nowhere to be seen. After calling his name for the third and last time, Iruka couldn't help but let out a depressed sigh when he was forced to fail Naruto. 10 minutes later the boy came in, huffing at his lack of breath. By the looks of his hair, he hadn't taken a proper shower in his rush to get here, and his hair was still wet with bits of soap in it. Shaking himself off, Naruto was about to ask if he could take the exam, but the look on his instructor's face told it all. So here Naruto found himself swinging back and forth on the swing on the academy grounds. He knew he would have passed if he hadn't been late, but the dream had made him sleep through his alarm. Stopping his mental beratement when he felt his Junshu chakra going off, he looked at the intruder with slanted eyes. Mizuki, what does he want? Naruto thought to himself, and as if on some sort of cue, the man began explaining how he could graduate. Initially Naruto was suspicious, and for good reason. What the Chunin was suggesting was clearly treason, but Naruto decided if he turned the man in he may get to graduate in a sneak peek at the scroll. A few hours later, Naruto was running through the forest surrounding Konoha, and stopped a miles off from where Mizuki originally intended. After cracking the verification code, Naruto assumed that his father's blood gave him access to the scroll, and with a shrug, the boy began digging into the scroll. The first technique, Kage Bushin, Shadow Clone, had his name written all over it, and unlike the normal Bunshin, it was direct splitting of his chakra, making it much easier for him to form it, rather than trying to force his chakra into a small place. The second jutsu though was much more appealing. Naiteki Kai, Inner Release, was the name. Not too impressive, Naruto thought to himself before he read the description. Releases the inner potential of a shinobi. Not to be confused with the 8 inner chakra gates, this release doesn't affect the chakra flow, it just releases the natural inhibits your body sets through a hypnotic trance. There were the only words written before the scroll went on to the next technique. I guess it's worth a shot, Naruto thought to himself while remembering what the Sandaime said. You are not the Kyuubi and you are not its container. You are the barrier that keeps him from coming back and never forget it. Naruto mentally recited before going through with the hand seals. Pain erupted through the boy's body as he let out a blood-curdling scream that rang throughout all of Konoha. But even then it didn't drown out the gravel voice's words in his head. Who has summoned me? And with that, Naruto blacked out. The flock of birds scattering from his right confirmed Naruto's position, and Iruka hoped that he got to the boy in time to stop anyone from exacting revenge against the Kyuubi vessel. Upon his arrival, Iruka let out a sigh when he found out that he was able to beat everyone to the boy, but as he approached Naruto, his shinobi sense was going off. Dodging the hail of kunai from behind, Iruka spun around before catching the Fuma shuriken that was about to cleave his head. Gripping the 4-bladed shuriken harder, Iruka looked at the smiling face of his assailant. Just Mizuki, Iruka thought before something clicked. The Hokage wanted Naruto back alive, and judging by his actions, Mizuki was about to bypass that order. Watching his fellow partner stand over the demon child protectively, Mizuki had to bite back a laugh at the irony. You, the child orphaned by the Kyuubi, are going to protect the very thing that took away what meant most to you. That's rich, Mizuki cried while laughing. Iruka just ignored the man while steeling himself for a fight. He's not going to kill Naruto, not until I can apologize to him, Iruka thought as he watched his assistant teacher calm down from his laughter. I guess you aren't going to step aside, so I guess I'll just have to move you, Mizuki said before dashing toward Iruka, his Fuma shuriken spinning like a buzzsaw. Letting in a calming breath, Iruka readied himself before dashing forward with his Fuma shuriken spinning. Inside Naruto, it hurts all over, Naruto thought, and to his surprise, his thoughts echoed across the sewer-like room he found himself in. Getting up off of the dank ground, Naruto looked forward and saw the biggest vault he had ever seen. The intricate stone lock had several red and blue pipes coming in and out of it. Letting his eyes fall from the top to bottom, Naruto saw a small opening, like a keyhole for the vault. Around the circular hole were words written in kanji. Here lies the power to damn the world. Scourge all those who live under the torments of Makai, and let the world feel the judgment of all those who seek to destroy it. However, here also lies the power of a savior, one at that will purge the world of all evil and protect those from the impending genocide. Come those who dare to unlock this power and control your destiny, and with that Naruto stopped reading the kanji spiraling around the dark hole. Fear, an emotion Naruto hadn't felt in years, covered the boy and clouded his judgment. This power was more than likely the Kyuubi's, and the rumbling behind the grand tomb walls only helped confirm that thought. Is this my potential Gigi? To either save all those I love, or damn them? Naruto thought to himself before plunging his arm into the unknown depths of the keyhole. The words spiraling around the hole began to glow crimson before turning into an abyssal black. The grand tomb door began to unlock itself around Naruto's imprisoned left arm. After much movement, the great stone wall slid into the corners of the sewer-like room, leaving Naruto's arm unharmed, but that was the least of his worries. Instead of rubbing his sore arm, Naruto's attention was captured by the black chakra that was coming out of the once sealed room like a low-lying fog. Behind the veil of darkness came a ghost pale arm covered in kanji, the same type of kanji that was on the door. Instantly, years of dreams came flooding back into Naruto's mind. Staring at the being that stepped out of the darkness, Naruto was only able to whisper, Shinigami. This being, the Shinigami, was the beast locked within Naruto. It alone controlled the borders between life and death and commanded inhabitants on both sides. Now it was looking Naruto in the eye and telling him, "Human, come and see if you are strong enough to take the power Yondaime left you during his last moments," the Shinigami said before moving towards Naruto. Dodging the swipe from the ghost-like hands of the Shinigami, Naruto instantly flared up his Junshu chakra and tried to land a Kenshoken strike with it, but what seemed like a direct hit turned out to be just a minor distraction for the death god. Okay, let's try this, Naruto thought before activating his Charka Shaku. Wrapping the energies around his fist, Naruto dashed at the monster and with a loud war cry, launched his fist into the Shinigami. Instead of blowing back the monster like Naruto thought, the Chakra Shaku, Dengeki would have, the Death Lord simply looked down on the boy whose arm was now stuck inside of him. Returning the favor, the Shinigami pushed his arm through the boy's chest and thus infected his chakra system. Now the true test begins, was all Naruto heard before a burning pain shot through his body and all his senses went blank. Topside, this should be over soon Naruto, I promise, Iruka thought to himself after hearing Naruto whisper, Shinigami, followed by loud moans of agony. The words death god never sat well with Iruka, especially since it had taken the fourth from the village and sealed a monster inside a child, and now that boy was whispering that in his sleep before moaning in pain was more than a bad omen for him. Clashing Fuma Shuriken with Fuma Shuriken, Iruka knew that it was only a matter of time before he would defeat Mizuki. Jumping back from their deadly game of touch and go as Iruka began to spin his stolen shuriken again and rushed forward to meet Mizuki, who was doing the same. Slowing down slightly to avoid Mizuki's attempt to cut his head off, Iruka countered with a downward slash that nicked Mizuki's attacking arm. Following it up with a back leg sidekick, Iruka landed a bone-shattering blow to Mizuki's stomach. Breathing in, Iruka never took his eyes off of Mizuki before exhaling it, charging forward faster than ever. Mizuki wasn't stupid. He knew that once he lost his element of surprise that Iruka would soon outclass him. This was the reason why he was the assistant sensei and Iruka commanded above him, but where Mizuki lacked in skill, he made up in cunning. He knew that Naruto was defenseless and that Iruka would do just about anything in his power to keep the boy safe, so that's why Mizuki sent his Fuma Shuriken speeding towards Naruto. Everything went according to the criminal's plan as Iruka's attention was averted to protect Naruto, and Mizuki was able to temporarily escape his imminent death. Throwing his own Fuma Shuriken, Iruka let out a sigh of relief when his connected with Mizuki's and caused it to swerve away from Naruto. Turning his gaze towards his assistant teacher, Iruka guessed that this was going to be an unarmed battle now. With Naruto's Junshu chakra thrashed around wildly, trying to attack the undead creature that was causing its host excoriating pain, but like before, the chakra simply phased through the being, leaving it unharmed. Feeling Kyuubi's trapped chakra trying to soothe the mind-numbing pain to no avail, Naruto found himself between consciousness and sweet slumber. Whatever this thing was, it was a sadist at heart, leaving Naruto in a constant stream of pain that wasn't enough to knock him out but just enough to keep each pain receptor howling repeatedly. Pushing through his pain, Naruto flexed his midsection just enough so that he could look the Shinigami in the eyes. The cold black eyes met shining blue, and at that moment, the dead pale skin began to spread through Naruto like an infection. Feeling the welcomed cooling effect the dead chakra was giving, Naruto almost fell asleep but stopped when he felt something warm on his face. Rubbing his cheek, the boy couldn't find anything, but the warm feeling continued to pool around his cheek, down his face, and successfully distracted the boy from his pain long enough to think. I can't die here. I would let so many people down, so many people that need me to be there, and with that images of his friends, Sakura, Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, and Hinata, flashed through his head before countless others that had in one way or another pushed him to be the person he was today. So Naruto gritted his teeth and began to fight the cold hand of death that was now just under his neck. Pushing the invading chakra inward, Naruto compressed it in his chest, and after a few agonizing moments of holding the force there, he heard the Shinigami say, "You are worthy." And with that, Naruto felt the burning pain stop and a wave of relief wash over him before he blacked out. Topside, Iruka found himself over Naruto, protecting the boy from the Fuma Shuriken that would have surely killed him. Even though Iruka managed to save Naruto's life, he couldn't help but curse at himself when he realized that they were both doomed now. He was in no condition to continue fighting Mizuki, especially now that the said Chunin had his favorite weapon back while Iruka was defenseless. Thinking back, Iruka knew this moment was unavoidable as soon as Mizuki managed to get past him and retrieve both of the Fuma shuriken while Iruka was dazed from the cheap shot he landed and being the underhanded bastard he was. He threw it at Naruto again, but this time Iruka didn't have one of his own to deflect it with, so there was only one option left. Now watching Mizuki close in on both of their prone and defenseless bodies, Iruka hoped Naruto would forgive him in the afterlife, but fate decided that he wouldn't have to wait until then. Naruto's eyes suddenly snapped open and in a flash he had stopped Mizuki's shuriken in his intensified Junshu chakra field. Looking at the shuriken that seemingly stopped in mid-air, Mizuki first suspected that Iruka had set him up, but from the look on his academy teacher's face he was as shocked as he was. It wasn't until Naruto said, "Don't ever attack Iruka-sensei again," did Mizuki snap out of his reverie. Just one look into the boy's eyes and Mizuki knew that this wasn't the Naruto that gave a half-effort in class, or was late to the graduation exam. This boy was the holder of the fiercest Biju chakra and by the look in his eyes he was his prey. Clutching his chest, Naruto saw Mizuki tense, expecting a blast from his chakra shaku, but what he got was something totally different. Instead of shooting chakra out of his pentacle, Naruto used his newest technique, Naiteki Kai, to unleash a surprising effect. The boy's usual black and blue outfit shifted to a traditional all-black kimono and hakama, but even with the change in clothes Naruto remained relatively the same until a hole appeared on his chest. The hole, decorated with 5 silver nodes surrounding him, laid directly behind his family's pentacle, and the instant Naruto looked down at it, a black chain shot before wrapping around his arm and digging into the ground, surrounded by black flames as it touched the ground. More than just a bit unnerved by the demon boy's transformation, Mizuki regained some lost confidence when Naruto fell to one knee, clutching his arm as the chains kept digging into the ground. Readying a second Fuma shuriken, Mizuki began to spin the blade like earlier, before taunting Naruto. "It seems the demon can't even control his own jutsu, and you thought that you could protect that idiot behind you when you can't even protect yourself." And with that Mizuki made a mad dash for Naruto, his blade buzzing behind him, which was ready to sever the boy's head. However, Naruto was not going to take this all lying down. On the contrary, he stood up with eyes blazing with fury before summoning from the depths of the earth his sword. Not just any sword, but something inside of Naruto said that this was his blade and more special than anything on this world. It was a Zanpakuto. Unsheathing his soul cutter, Naruto cut the blades right off of Mizuki's Fuma shuriken, before Naruto whipped his chains that were wrapped around his left arm at Mizuki, trying to capture the traitor. After watching Mizuki dodge and his chains cut through a few trees, Naruto stopped before he leveled the whole section of the forest. He stuck his Zanpakuto in the ground before making the seal for his other new jutsu. Taju Kage Bushin, Naruto cried as dozens of clones, all dressed in black with matching Zanpakuto, appeared in the area before grinning at Mizuki evilly. It was a long night for the soon-to-be ex-academy sensei. Dawn, Sarutobi couldn't help but laugh at Mizuki's predicament when the Anbu brought Naruto, Iruka, and the now lifeless Mizuki back. He had seen it all through his crystal ball, but the real-life version was so much funnier. Drawing his stern face and relieving the Anbu of their duty, Sarutobi went through the motions on lecturing Naruto before getting the boy's input on what had happened. Not taken back by the boy's ingenuity and forethought, Sarutobi only saw one flaw in Naruto's plan, and that was, "So Naruto-kun, you may have successfully captured the criminal and saved the village scroll, but why did you have to read the scroll? I'm sure that wasn't needed for you to complete the mission," Sarutobi asked in a playful tone. Even though Naruto had done the village a good deed, he still needed to remind the boy that he wasn't totally off the hook. He had almost lost his life tampering with the scroll, and now he might have tampered the seal beyond repair. Looking like a deer in front of a Kaiden jutsu, Naruto quickly put on his smiling idiot mask before explaining his reasons to Sarutobi in hopes that it would help get him out of trouble. "You see, old man, Mizuki would have probably made a run for it as soon as he found out it was a trap, so I needed to make him believe that I really stole the scroll, or he would have just left the village," Naruto said, looking the old man in the eye with an idiotic smile on his face. Without even listening to the blonde's explanation, Sarutobi could read, "I read the scroll because I needed more jutsu," all over the blonde's face. Shaking his head, Sarutobi let the blonde go with a smile and decided he would get to the bottom of what the jutsu had done to Naruto later. Now for my favorite pastime, Sarutobi thought after he checked for the third time that Naruto and Iruka were out of the building and that he was cleared to read his little orange book. With Naruto and Iruka, it was late and from the looks of it, Naruto would be taking another year of academy classes with Iruka. Oh well, it won't be too bad this time around, especially without Mizuki Teme around and me being pissed at Iruka-sensei, Naruto thought as Iruka guided him to the ramen stand. Looking at the chunin, Naruto nodded his head and dug in. After about 5 bowls and a hole in Iruka's wallet, the chunin turned to Naruto nervously and said, "Close your eyes." For Naruto that statement was double-loaded, as he had grown up trusting only himself, few others, and the Sandame, but after what Iruka had done for him tonight, Naruto figured that it wouldn't hurt to let down his barriers again. So closing his eyes, Naruto heard some shuffling, and after he heard, "Open your eyes," Naruto was in shock as Iruka handed him his hiat. "I guess I'll see you tomorrow for team assignments," Iruka said, smiling at the boy who had dropped his idiot mask and gave the man a true smile. Nodding, Naruto tied the hiat tight before parting ways with Iruka. The next day, the 6 hours between his late graduation and class was the longest Naruto ever had to wait for something. In the few minutes he got of sleep between the time, he got more and more images from the land his body spirit knew, but his mind couldn't remember. It had picked up at a different spot this time. He was still in his extravagant crimson room, but something was off this time. Looking to his side, Naruto saw the ninja who was trying to assassinate him last time he checked, but by the situation they were in, Naruto concluded they were more than friendly now. The woman, whose skin was like that of shining bronze, looked into his eyes with her own cat-like golden eyes of hers. After a few whispers, Naruto's world blackened for a second and he found himself back in the same room, but the assassin was much different now. Her well-kept jet black hair was now in disarray, and her tight-fitting black linen outfit was cast aside, forgotten at the bedside. Looking at the now naked female who was crawling towards him with her cat-like eyes focused solely on his, Naruto couldn't help but feel like he, or whoever he was now, was going to be her new chew toy. And as the red silk bed lining was about to fall from her Naruto's mind blackened again, but unlike the last time he didn't return to his dream but to the waking world. Looking at his alarm clock, Naruto let out a breath before saying aloud, "Might as well take a shower now that I have some time," before making his way to the shower, hoping that a cold shower would wipe some of the hot sweat and hentai thoughts away. The nice, cold shower did the trick and Naruto didn't have even the slightest hentai thought in his mind. No, the boy thought, I just had to take an effing cold shower. I feel like an effing icicle now. Rubbing some feeling back into his legs, Naruto moved to his arms, and after 5 full minutes of rubbing, Naruto looked down at his left arm that just didn't seem to warm up and saw something that scared him shitless. Coiling up his arm were 2 chains tattoos, interlocking in an intricate pattern all the way up his arm before stopping at his shoulder where the 2 split, where each were traveling to the middle of his chest where the chains had originally started from, one in the front and the other in the back. The sensation, much like the one he felt when the Shinigami was trying to kill him, scared Naruto into a panic. How am I going to hide this? Forget how am I going to hide this, how am I going to survive if this thing tries to kill me again? Naruto thought in frenzy. It had taken him a full 10 minutes for Naruto to calm down enough to rationalize his thoughts. It hasn't killed me yet, so it must be dormant. The boy began nodding in approval to his own theory. So if I just wrap it, it shouldn't activate unless, and that's when it hit Naruto. The chains only sprang to life when he used Naiteki Kai. That must be the key to activating it, and if I stay away from using that jutsu, I should be fine, Naruto thought as he wrapped his left arm in bandages. Naruto checked twice to make sure they wouldn't come loose before leaving for the academy. On his arrival, Naruto ignored those who questioned why was he here, and just shut up the more persistent with a simple point at his head. Looking up at the smug Uchiha who didn't look too thrilled that Naruto had passed, Naruto found that annoying the Uchiha was much more pleasurable now that he had the arrogant smirk off of his face. Sitting down with Hinata, Shikamaru, and Choji, Naruto watched Sakura and Ino fight for a spot by Sasuke with Sakura as the winner. Rolling his eyes when Ino stalked back to sit next to Choji, Naruto proceeded to tell them a heavily edited version of how he passed and now he would be able to join a team with them to kick some enemy nin and Uchiha, but That was until Iruka said, Team 7. Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto didn't know whether to be irritated or relieved. Even though Iruka had said he passed, the man must have been up all night getting Naruto a spot with the graduating class, but couldn't he have put him with Hinata or Shikamaru? Hell, he would have settled for Ino, but he just had to get the Uchiha. It's not fair, Naruto thought to himself, and as if reading his mind Iruka said, Naruto, don't complain. You have the worst scores in the class since technically you failed, but because of uncontrollable events, you have been given permission by the Hokage to pass. Biting his bottom lip, Naruto caught the retorts that were on the edge of his tongue. He didn't want to be teamed up with his rival. Not only would the boy be able to see more of his techniques that way, but also the Sharingan, Copywheel Eye, to worry about when it woke up. Figures that the biggest prick in the world gets the Sharingan, and with it access to all my jutsu, Naruto thought to himself, and the injustice done to him. The Sharingan was the pride of the Uchiha and their enemy's worst nightmare. One look and all jutsu, your plans, and your secrets were revealed to the red-eyed bastards. Turning to Iruka, Naruto sat back down with his friends and waited for the rest of the teams to be called. It seemed fate only hated Naruto as Hinata got Kiba and Shino, who Naruto considered good shinobi, but they were a bit unsocial, or in Kiba's case too social. As for Shikamaru, he got paired with his lifelong friends Choji and Ino. Seeing everyone else in his group happy with whom they were paired with, Naruto's sour mood only sunk lower. Even his best friend and sister, Hinata, couldn't get him to smile his idiot mask smile. I guess the thought of being paired with Sasuke was too much, even for Naruto's idiot mask to hide, Hinata thought before using her trump card. Whispering to Naruto, it's not too bad, we can still train together after team meetings, and besides you have Sakura as your partner, Hinata said, hoping that her words would lift his spirits. It was a little-known fact to Hinata Naruto had thought Sakura was cute and was a key factor to turning her off to the thoughts of Naruto as a lover and to Naruto as a brother. However, what looked like something to cheer the boy up turned out to have the opposite effect as Naruto retreated farther into himself. Sakura is cute, but her infatuation with the Uchiha is more than enough reason not to chase her, Naruto thought to himself, at all the possible outcomes of this team being put together would lead to. On one hand, he would end up beating Sasuke into a coma once he started on his emo trips and successfully getting Sakura to never talk to him again. Smiling at the thought of Sasuke beaten so bad he couldn't talk, Naruto's conscience piped up saying, but you would lose a friend in the process. Letting out a sigh, Naruto knew his friends were worth more than gold to him, and losing Sakura would be a blow to him, so Naruto just settled for fantasies of him upstaging the Uchiha survivor. Several fantasies later, Naruto wiped away the thoughts of hitting Sasuke where it hurt and came to the conscious world when he noticed that all his friends were gone. Even Hinata, who had been sitting right next to him, was gone, and as any good ninja, Naruto felt embarrassed that he had been so far gone that he hadn't noticed that she left or 2 hours had passed. Taking his eyes off of the clock, Naruto noticed Sakura was still kissing up to Sasuke, and the brooding Uchiha looked as if his patience had worn out. Laughing at boy's predicament, Naruto figured it was for the best that Sakura liked the Uchiha instead of him and decided to celebrate his revelation with a prank on their late teacher. Seeing Naruto's inner child come out, Sakura couldn't help but agree with Naruto when he felt him flare his Junshu chakra subtly, before hiding something in its genjutsu field. In addition, as if willed by the gods themselves, their incredibly late instructor came into the room with a little orange book in hand. From there everything fell into place. Hidden underneath his genjutsu was a bucket of water held by Naruto's chakra, and once the door upon the seal holding the bucket broke, falling on Kakashi's head and soaking him to the bone and ruining his book. Looking at his now ruined copy of Icha Icha Paradise, Kakashi held back his killing intent before speaking out. Your first impression sucks, before pointing to the roof and leaving for the stairs. Following Kakashi with a smirk, Naruto was already feeling better, and the thought of having Sasuke on his team was a little more bearable. So why don't you tell me your likes, dislikes, and hobbies, Kakashi said, trying to break the ice. His one visible eye was totally focused on them now his favorite book was destroyed. Looking from face to face, Kakashi realized none of them were going to volunteer and decided to go when Sakura said, "Shouldn't you go first, sensei?" My name is Hitaki Kakashi and my likes are none of your business. My dislikes are things that piss me off, and my hobbies are well. Kakashi said, letting out a pervert giggle after his long pause. It didn't take much for Naruto to piece together that he was a pervert just like most other men Naruto knew outside of the academy. Watching as Kakashi pointed to Sakura saying, "Ladies first," Naruto was interested in hearing what the girl's opinion would be now that she had a taste of what the shinobi life really was like. My name is Haruno Sakura and my likes are training and my dislikes are Ino Pig, and my hobbies are working hard enough for a certain someone to notice me, Sakura said, giving a pointed look to Sasuke, who just ignored the girl's presence. Both Naruto and Kakashi suppressed a sigh before saying to themselves, "At least she isn't totally obsessed with Sasuke," before Kakashi pointed to the boy in question. With an attitude fitting his coming emo trip, Sasuke said, "My name's Uchiha Sasuke and my likes are irrelevant, my dislikes are fangirls, and my dream is more of an ambition, and that ambition is to see a certain man dead," Sasuke said, effectively killing all the happy thoughts around him and making Kakashi say to himself, "Great. A teen angst that who has an Avenger complex. I should have stayed Anbu," before pointing to Naruto, hoping to the gods that he would be at least remotely normal. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto and my likes are my family, dislikes are pricks in general, and my hobby is to better myself to keep all that I hold dear safe," Naruto said, dropping his idiot mask and looking Kakashi right in the eye. The experienced Jonin didn't even bat an eyelash, but on the inside he was a bit shocked that someone so young had such cold eyes. Kyuubi caused more harm than anyone could imagine, Kakashi thought while reminiscing on his dead teammates and sensei. "I'll make sure something like that never happens again," Kakashi thought before thinking of the perfect exam to give to his cell. Standing and facing all three of his students, Kakashi said, "Tomorrow the real test will be beginning, and if you pass all three of you will be genin, but if you fail it's back to the academy with you," earning him the shocked expression he was hoping for. "The passing rate is 33% and we will start at 8 sharp. And a little hint, I wouldn't eat breakfast if I were you," Kakashi said while biting back a giggle. "We'll see if the fangirl, the Avenger, and the Enigma can make the cut," the silver-haired Jonin thought before poofing away, leaving his three students to sulk, brood, or look confused. Once the team dispersed, Naruto headed directly for the shopping district of Konoha. The 2-hour wait for his sensei made Naruto think back to how he became a genin and what lurked inside his body. The Shinigami was now a part of him, and whether he liked it or not, it wasn't going anywhere. Even though the thought of being a death god scared him senseless, the thought of using a sword wasn't too bad. The only problem was that no one in the village would sell him a sharpened sword, under the thoughts that he would kill them in their sleep. So Naruto was forced to buy a wooden sword and hope that he could find someone to teach him to use it. However, before he even began thinking of possible teachers, the bottomless pit he called a stomach was calling for food. "I'll figure this out later, but for now I need food," Naruto said to himself before making his way to his favorite ramen stand. Much to his surprise, both Team 8 and Team 10 were there prepping themselves for the next day. Apparently his group wasn't the only group that had to take another exam the next day, and by the looks of it all of them were nervous. "Hinata, you know you are good enough to pass, and even with Kiba on your team, Shino more than makes up for it, so you guys are assured to pass," Naruto said to the girl who looked to be reverting to her old unconfident self. Picking fun at Kiba was worth it to see his friend smile again, and with his stomach filled and mission complete, Naruto went home and tried to get some sleep for the upcoming day. Dreams? Whoever he was, all Naruto knew was that he was angry. No, furious was more of the word, as Naruto watched his oh-so-familiar body destroy the forest surrounding his old Japanese-style castle under the red sky. The servants were all inside huddled together, hoping that their master wouldn't take his anger out on them, and by the looks of it, they were right to be hiding. Red chakra shot out of his body much like his Junshu chakra, but unlike his chakra, the crimson chakra melted everything it touched, scorching the ground under him. After melting a better part of the forest, a single servant came from behind him. The poor woman was trembling in her shoes and wouldn't even look him in the eye. After a few words were said, the red chakra receded and became what looked like 9 long spear-like tails. Naruto felt himself smile and dismissed the girl, back to his castle, before he felt a smile on his face. For once, Naruto actually heard something from his mute flashbacks. "The humans will pay," was the solitary phrase Naruto heard before he felt his body shift and change and the world go black. Waking up in a cold sweat, Naruto knew that whatever happened next directly affected all the humans in the world, and for some strange reason he felt that it especially had something to do with Konoha. Looking at his alarm clock, Naruto noticed he had woken up an hour early and decided to take a long shower to rid him of the sweaty smell and try to make sense out of another one of those familiar dreams. With 30 minutes to spare, Naruto couldn't help but make himself breakfast, and by the time he had gotten to the planned meeting area, Naruto had already eaten a good 5 bowls of ramen. "It's cheap, but it gets the job done," the boy thought to himself before watching a zombie like Sakura make her appearance. The girl looked like she got any sleep at all, and from the sound of her stomach, she didn't get to eat either. Naruto felt bad for the girl as he said his hellos, but stemmed his guilt with the thoughts that she should be ready for anything. However, when Sasuke came in, looking like he could kill a Jonin with one look, Naruto couldn't help but find that funny. "Serves him right for being such a prick in the academy," Naruto said to himself, while quietly snickering at the Uchiha who was now trying to look cool by brooding on the other end of the training field, something that he was horribly failing at now, no thanks to his stomach. 3 hours passed and Kakashi broke his record of extreme tardiness by arriving at the training patch at 11 o'clock sharp. Naruto, who had been packed full on arrival, had thoroughly digested his food and was ready to go, but his teammates had to settle for a weak glare at the sensei and Sakura yelling, "You're late." Looking at his hopeful students, Kakashi noticed that Naruto was the only one that seemed to have life and was showing it by doing some stretches to loosen up for his test. "Good, it seems at least one of my students can think for themselves. Now let's see if he can think outside of the box," Kakashi thought before giving the weak excuse, "I got lost on the path of life," which only served to infuriate Sakura more. After dispelling a Chunin-level genjutsu from Sakura, Kakashi said, "Good, but I don't recall telling you that it was okay to start, or even give any directions." Looking at the blushing pink-haired girl with his now upside-down eye, he took out 2 bells. Kakashi then said, "To pass, you each have to retrieve a bell," opening his lazy eye fully, showing them that he was serious. "But Kakashi-sensei, there are only 2 bells," Sakura said, stating the obvious. Looking at the man nervously, Sakura knew that there was something off with the man, and with him dispelling one of her strongest genjutsu without even blinking, just further confirmed that theory. "Well, that means one of you is going to go back to the academy, assuming that any of you have enough skill to take a bell from me. I'm setting the timer for noon, and by the looks of it, you only have 45 minutes before time is up. Come at me with everything you have and don't even bother if you aren't coming at me with the intent to kill," the cyclopic Jonin said before throwing Sasuke to the ground at the boy's failed charge attempt. Fortunately for Sasuke, Sakura had picked up the slack and cast another of her best genjutsu while Kakashi was distracted, giving Sasuke a chance to escape with her before Kakashi decided to do more than hurt the boy's ego. In a flash, the two were hidden in the trees and were watching in surprise as Naruto hadn't moved an inch but was standing right in front of Kakashi with his idiot mask on at full power. Shaking the remnants of the genjutsu from his vision, Kakashi looked at Naruto before saying, "You're a bit off, aren't you? And here I was thinking that you were the only who could think for himself," Kakashi said while looking at Naruto before pulling out a brand new limited edition copy of Icha Paradise that he got through means he didn't want to talk about. "I'll leave that to your imagination." As Kakashi predicted, Naruto charged in blind fury, and when Kakashi went in to subdue the boy before spewing a lesson in life, something that the boy would take to heart, Naruto smirked. While Wild Leaping Attack was just to lower Kakashi's guard, and now that Naruto close enough, the boy unleashed a Chakra Shaku, Tama. All Kakashi could do was widen his eyes before the blast of chakra engulfed him. Naruto, who had just landed, was smirking under his idiot mask, before pain erupted between his cheeks. Turn around, Naruto saw Kakashi with a kunai jabbed in his ass, and then felt an explosion erupt. Sakura couldn't help but wince for her friend as he flew into the air before poofing out of existence. How did Naruto do that? Sakura asked herself when she realized that what Naruto had done wasn't a bushin. Moving from her spot, she realized that she needed to find Sasuke. Not because she wanted to be near her crush, but during short glimpse of watching Naruto's battle, none of them had any chance of beating Kakashi alone. Meanwhile, Naruto was hidden in a tree near where Kakashi had fought his clone, and thanks to his Junshu chakra blending with the natural chakra surrounding them, Kakashi had little to no chance of finding him unless he was looking directly at him. However, that thought alone was comforting as Naruto assessed the situation he and his teammates were in. Shit, even with a clear shot and the element of surprise, I couldn't land a blow on him. At least he used that jutsu on the clone instead of me, Naruto said to himself before going to find Sakura and, with much less enthusiasm, Sasuke. I got a good batch. One is proficient with genjutsu, another knows Kage Bushin, and the last is the only surviving Uchiha. Kakashi thought to himself as he hid underground, safely away from Sasuke's Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu. After grabbing the Uchiha's legs and pulling him underground, Kakashi began his lecture on looking underneath when he felt a genjutsu fall on him for the third time. She's good, but this is getting tiring, Kakashi said to himself before guiding himself through the waves of vertigo, and gave Sakura a taste of her own medicine within a second's time. With two students incapacitated, Kakashi bounded off to find his last hiding student, but unknown to him Naruto was closer than he thought. Coming out of the woods, Naruto made sure he woke Sakura up from her genjutsu-induced sleep before approaching Sasuke. Once the girl stopped muttering Sasuke-kun in her sleep and realized whatever Kakashi did was fake, he got her to team up with him. Now time for the hard part, Naruto thought to himself before going to the fuming boy who was stuck buried from the neck down. Squatting in front of Sasuke, Naruto started with, "I know you don't like me and for all I care you could burn in hell." Naruto started before hearing Sakura gasp. She must think that's blasphemy or something, Naruto thought while snickering before continuing. But as you saw from my fight and what position you are currently in, we don't stand a chance fighting him alone, Naruto said, leaving the implication that Sasuke picked up on. Looking at Sakura, he sent the girl a look saying, "What did you think that I was going to do? Come out and say we need your help, Sasuke?" However, before she could answer, Sasuke said, "So what are you suggesting, Dobi?" smirking at the boy from his vulnerable position. Naruto had to use all the self-control fibers in his body to resist the growing dark urge to pound Sasuke's face in with a chakra shaku, Degeki. Instead, Naruto just twitched slightly from his newly dubbed nickname, before letting Sakura talk to Sasuke. "Sasuke-kun, there is no way that you can beat Kakashi-sensei alone. He's a Jonin for a reason, and the only chance we will have is if we team up," Sakura said in a gentle voice. Both Naruto and Sasuke were in shock at what just happened. The words, "no way," and "Sasuke," came out of her mouth without "there's anyone hotter than" between them. Looking at the girl, Sasuke grumbled before whispering, "I'll do it," before Naruto already had his hand in the ground and pulled Sasuke up with the help of his chakra shaku, Degeki. Looking to Sakura, Naruto whispered with a devious grin, "Okay, here's the plan," before dropping Sasuke straight on his ass. With 5 minutes left on the clock, Kakashi couldn't help but say to himself, "And here I thought this group might pass," while reading his little orange book, and just as he was getting to the best part, his maybe students came at him from all angles. Not even looking up from his book, he sidestepped Sakura before making a grab for Sasuke only to get a handful of air. "Genjutsu?" Kakashi thought before adding, "But it's not just Sakura's, no, this genjutsu saturated the area in chakra." Before Kakashi knew it, he had fallen into their trap. Dispelling the genjutsu, Kakashi found it took much more chakra than the last three. Looking around, he saw Naruto holding two bells and Sasuke had in front of him a copy of his Icha Paradise while holding his hands in the ready position for another Gukakyu. "Okay, it seems you got the bells, Naruto, but now who passes with you?" Kakashi asked. "They have exceeded my expectations, but it's time for the final test," the Jonin said to himself before looking intently at Naruto. Meeting his gaze, Naruto smirked while dropping his idiot mask and said, "No one, because if only two of us pass we would break up this winning team. Right guys?" Looking at Sakura, who nodded happily, and Sasuke, who just smirked at Naruto and with him taking that as a yes, Naruto looked back at Kakashi and said, "And besides, if you fail us we'll be forced to burn your book." Smiling his idiot smile at the man, but his eyes telling Kakashi he wasn't lying. Sighing, Kakashi said, "Team 7 passes," before turning his now upside down, eye, which was staring intently into the little orange book that no one saw him get. "First mission begins at 8 sharp, were the last things Kakashi said before disappearing in a plume of smoke and with a perverted giggle. Turning to his new teammates, Naruto said, "Well, seeing as we are now a team, maybe we should get to know each other better," before leading them to his favorite ramen stand. The genin life is overrated, Naruto said to himself while holding a hissing brown cat in his arms. It dare not scratch or bite him again after the wave of killing intent Naruto shot at it the first time, but that didn't stop it from making Naruto's life miserable. This is the fourth freaking time today, the boy thought when he returned the cat to its overbearing owner. The woman, the Fire Lord's wife, was just about strangling the cat as it tried frantically to escape. Maybe if she squeezes hard enough, she'll break the cat's spine and it won't be able to run anymore, Naruto thought sadistically while walking to the Hokage's office to receive his pay. D-class missions sucked, but with the extra time, Naruto could train by himself afterward, and whether he liked it or not, he needed the money. Unfortunately, doing the same mission over and over again was taking its toll on all the members of Team 7, including Kakashi, who was one step away from unleashing his Ninken dogs on the cat and saying they found it dead. But before Kakashi could politely request a higher-level mission to test his team, Naruto spoke up. "Hokage-sama," Naruto started, much to everyone's surprise. Every time he addressed the man it was either "Gigi" or "old man," but now he was oddly polite. He must want something, Sarutobi thought to himself before inhaling some smoke from his pipe. "You know, Naruto, you don't have to address me by my last name, you can always call me Sasuke." "One?" the elder Sasuke said before getting an incredulous look from everyone in the room. The older half, Kakashi and Iruka, were shocked he was letting a genin call him by his first name, and the younger half, Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto, were shocked he shared the same name as the Uchiha survivor. Figures. The Uchiha favor power, and they must have thought giving one of their sons the mighty professor's name would make him just as strong. "Too bad Sasuke's too much of a prick to ever beat me," Naruto thought to himself before turning back to the Hokage. "Okay, Sasuke-sama, could you please give us a more challenging mission, like something in the C class?" Naruto said, ignoring the younger Sasuke who was preening like a pea at the words, "Sasuke-sama." If he thinks I'll ever say that to him, he's more delusional than his fangirls, Naruto thought to himself while ignoring Iruka's outbreak. Now Iruka, maybe if Naruto could show me how much he learned as a genin and prove to me he knows what a C-class mission entails, I might let them have it, the aged Sasuke said, before looking intently at Naruto waiting for him to start. If there was ever a moment his team lacked faith in him, it was here. Therefore, deciding to use some of the amazing wit the older Sasuke imparted him with, Naruto began saying, "Well, there are several class of missions, starting with D class like we just completed. These are meant to build teamwork and trust among a genin cell without putting them in harm's way. Next is C class, which is done primarily by genin who have established a teamwork basis. At this level, they do not engage other shinobi, but do fight against bandits and other types of untrained rogues. From there, start the B-class missions that are done by Chunin and Special Jonin. Here we will engage enemy shinobi of the same level or lower, and the risk of death is much higher than that of the lower class missions. Above that is A class, and that is reserved for full-fledged Jonin who are willing to engage shinobi of the same level. This class has a higher mortality rating and is only given to the most elite Jonin," Naruto said before Sasuke stopped him. Looking around, the boy saw his team was slack-jawed, and Kakashi was looking at him with an appraising eye. "Seems there is a bit more underneath than I suspected," the white-haired Jonin thought before Naruto continued. "So is that good enough to get us the mission?" Naruto asked, knowing he could have said more, but then again, genin aren't supposed to know that there are S-class missions of village security and that only Anbu, the elite of the elite, take these assassination missions. Sakura, who was slack-jawed at the fact that Naruto just recited, in detail, a textbook answer to the shinobi mission class system without slipping up once and adding additional information that he shouldn't have known. Is this the same boy, who would only answer questions when Iruka was picking on him? Sakura asked herself while Naruto was facing the Hokage. Sasuke on the other hand was impressed, which he hid under a slight surprised look, that Naruto knew that much. "I guess he's worthy to be my rival after all," Sasuke thought before turning his attention to the Hokage who he shared his name with. Looking at the Sandame's approving smile, Naruto smiled back, knowing that they wouldn't be chasing after that cat anymore. Watching Haruka poof away to get their client, Naruto looked around and saw that his team may have some questions for him later. Oh well, it's better than them thinking I'm some sort of idiot, who just happens to be able to destroy trees with raw chakra, Naruto thought to himself, remembering the good times when he didn't have to worry about catching a cat at least 4 times a day. When he heard a knock at the door, Naruto turned around with his team to face his client, and what he saw wasn't what he was hoping for. Their client was a man at least in his late 50s, who by the smell of him was hardly ever sober, and to top it off he had the audacity to say, "Well, what do we have here? A blonde midget playing shinobi. Are you sure that he can protect me?" before introducing himself as Tazuna. The hell, not only does he call me short, but also doubts my skills. Oh, I'll give him something that he needs protection from, Naruto thought to himself, but was stopped from killing the man by Kakashi, who was not only acting as a human shield for Tazuna, but was also getting back at the man for Naruto. I'd advise you not to insult my students, Tazuna. They are trained shinobi who can kill you, especially the blonde one you just called a midget, Kakashi said, stepping aside for the man to see a pissed-off Naruto who flickered his finger at him. I'll leave you to guess which one. And left a scratch on the door. Looking at the now scared man, Naruto smirked before Kakashi decided to cut in. Now that we have that out of the way, Tazuna, I am a Jonin, and I should be more than enough to stop anyone who may want to harm you on this C-class mission, Kakashi said, taking note of Tazuna's nervous demeanor. Turning to his team, Kakashi then said, "We meet at the gate in an hour, read 3 hours, before leaving in a plume of smoke." Spending his 3 hours packing his spare clothes and gear, Naruto looked at the wooden sword laying next to his bed before saying aloud, "Maybe Kakashi knows how to use a sword," and leaving his apartment. With his wooden sword strapped to his back along with his gear, Naruto looked around and saw only Tazuna was at the gate. The aged man looked beyond pissed, and when he spotted Naruto, he immediately tried to apologize in hopes that he wouldn't see what else the boy could do without him seeing. "Don't worry about it. Just think of standing here for the last 2 hours as payment," Naruto said, feeling better that he didn't tell the man that Kakashi is usually a few hours late. It wasn't long before both his teammates showed up, and they were just in time to hear Kakashi's lame excuse. "I was held at the hospital after saving an old lady from a raging fire," Kakashi said while reading his orange book that Tazuna immediately recognized. "Liar," Sakura yelled for good spirit, and Kakashi just shrugged. Somewhere across town an old woman thanked her young silver-hair savior for saving her from a burning building, not that anyone knew. Without further ado, the team left with their client, who was talking to Kakashi about which Icha paradise was the best. "Tazuna, I beg to differ, but when Meiko and Hana crashed Yugito's session with Sakura wasn't the best part." "No, my friend, when all 4 girls invited Keiko over for a session was the best part," Kakashi said, a bit too loud for his students' liking. While Sakura was fuming that her name was in a perverted book and Sasuke was struggling to get the mental images out, Naruto just thought, this is going to be a long trip. 3 hours later, when Naruto saw the oddly suspicious puddle in the middle of the road, when it hadn't rained in days, the first thought that crossed through Naruto's mind was, finally something to do. However, on further contemplation the boy realized, if they think that hiding in a puddle when it hadn't rained in days is tactful, maybe this won't be so fun. Therefore, resisting the urge to fire a chakra shaku Tama at the puddle and saving all of them some time, Naruto just waited and watched the oddly placed puzzle, hoping someone other than Kakashi would pick up the disturbance. After about a minute, Sakura stopped kissing up to Sasuke and noticed the puddle, leaving the lone Uchiha ignorant to the danger that they were in. Swish! In the span of half a second, Kakashi had been ripped apart by the puddle dweller's chain connected to what looked like matching gauntlets. Geez, these guys must be broke if they can't even afford to get a set of gauntlets for each of them, Naruto thought to himself as one brother rushed him and the other Sasuke. Following the said Uchiha's lead, Naruto threw a kunai next to Sasuke's shuriken to lock the chain in place, immobilizing their attacks. Watching Sasuke stand in front of Tazuna and before performing an advanced taijutsu combo on one brother, Naruto decided to wrap this up quickly by landing a quick blow to the stomach with a half-powered chakra shaku, Degeki. Watching the man crumple over his probably broken ribs, Naruto motioned for Sakura to do her part. In what looked like a frightening display of hypnosis, Sakura used a genjutsu, inspired by Ino, to drag some information from the captured nins. The men struggled for about a second before the genjutsu hit them at full power, and they started spilling secrets left and right. I wet the bed until I was 15. My brother is a closet pervert, and we work in a gay bar for extra cash, the brother on the right said before falling back into his genjutsu-induced sleep. Pretending she didn't hear that, Sakura asked, "Okay, who are you working for?" hoping that they would give her a straight answer. "We work for Momochi Zabuza, got a recent job, lots of cash." "Gatu, bridge builder," the nin said before passing out. The genjutsu had run its course and he and his brother would be out long enough for them to pick them up on the way back or until someone came and killed them. Either way was fine with Naruto, who had more pressing matters. However, before Naruto could lay a finger on their lying client, Kakashi made his appearance. Looking at his team, he was glad to see no one was surprised to see him. After noticing this, he said, "Good work. Your teamwork was flawless, and you managed to pull some information out of your captured enemies, very shinobi-like," the man said, making all three of his students swell with pride. Some more so than others, such as Sasuke for example. Turning to the bridge builder, Kakashi began to tear into the man before pulling the reasons why he lied about the mission level before threatening to end his life for lying to him. Naruto was up for beating the shit out of the man for lying to him before completing the mission, but what Kakashi was suggesting would put him out on the streets. C-class missions didn't come cheap, and Naruto needed the money to pay his landlord. Stopping Kakashi from terminating their contract, Naruto said, "Kakashi, you heard the man. The wave won't survive without the bridge, and I don't know about you guys, but I know how harsh the world can be, and that's something no one should experience. Therefore, I say we complete the mission and bump up the price later," before turning to his teammates. Sasuke was ready and showed it in his wise smirk, while Sakura looked a bit less decisive. Weighing the options, the pros being that she could impress Sasuke and get stronger to beat her rival, outweighed the cons, which were dying or being maimed beyond repair with her logic. Nodding at Naruto, the said boy turned to Kakashi, who was still edging for his kunai knife. Letting out a sigh, the man turned to Tazuna before saying, "I've been overruled. But this mission is now considered an A- class mission. You better be able to pay later," Kakashi said, leaving one final threat, before turning to his team. "From here on out, we have to be on full alert. The two you just faced were the demon brothers of the mist and were of the Chunin rank. With that in mind, the next person we encounter will be at least Jonin, so are you sure you still want to continue?" Kakashi asked, looking intently at his team. He remembered what happened to his team when they went in over their heads, and it was the reason he was now short one teammate and now wore a crudely made eye patch. Crossing deeper into the mist-covered field, Kakashi knew his students were on edge, and frankly they should be, knowing that a Jonin could pop out at any moment from the mist. Hearing the faint whistle of something slicing through still air, Kakashi yelled, "Get down!" while taking Tazuna and Sakura with him. "Damn, I knew there was something wrong with that rabbit Naruto almost killed earlier," Kakashi said to himself as he got up and drew a kunai. It was the middle of summer and a snow-white rabbit had just happened to cross their path, but being so deep into his book, Kakashi waved it off as an escaped lab animal. Cursing himself for being careless, he looked up at the giant Zanbato that was stuck in a nearby tree. Kakashi couldn't but feel a little fear creep into him. A mist swordsman this far out. "Damn, I'm going to need my Sharingan. Gotta make this fast," the silver-haired Jonin thought to himself as the mist cleared, revealing his opponent. The man in what looked like cowskin clothing turned to Kakashi before speaking out. "Sharingan Kakashi, it will an honor to kill you," the man said, while Sasuke said to himself, "Sharingan Kakashi," before Kakashi cut in saying, "So my reputation precedes me, demon of the mist, Momochi Zabuza." Zabuza let out a laugh before saying, "Anyone who reads their bingo book would know of you, but for you to know me will make it an even greater honor when I cut off your head with Kabikari Hucho, head-chopping cleaver, while sending out some killing intent." In an instant he had broken their formation to protect Tazuna, and in a faint whisper Zabuza said, "Muon Satsujin Jutsu, silent homicide technique." But Kakashi stopped his sword swing with his kunai before he could kill Tazuna. Unfortunately for Zabuza, Kakashi wasn't done, and with a war cry he launched the silent killer into the nearby lake. Rising from the depths, Zabuza said, "Kirigakure no Jutsu, just loud enough to frighten the genin and worry Kakashi, who raised his hiat, revealed his Sharingan eye, effectively pissing off Sasuke. How does someone outside the Uchiha clan have a Sharingan, while I can't awaken mine? The boy thought while Zabuza said, "Good job Kakashi, now take off the kid gloves so when I kill you, you know that there was absolutely nothing you could have done," his voice bouncing from every direction. A true master of hidden mist swordsmanship. This should be a challenge, the Kopinen thought to himself, before he felt Zabuza's breath on his neck. Where should I hit first, the heart, kidney, lungs, or brain? Zabuza said while hiding in the mist, just naming a few of the fatal places to be hit. Dodging the swing, Kakashi ducked down before driving forward and stabbing Zabuza in the stomach, and he would have killed the man if it wasn't a Mizu Bunshin, mist clone. The bridge builder. Kakashi thought before making his way to Tazuna and stopping the blow that would have ended the man's life, but put him in position for Zabuza to return the favor for the kick Kakashi had landed earlier. Watching the man sink, Zabuza went on top of the water to make sure the Jonin was dead when Kakashi copied Zabuza's earlier appearance and burst through the water before placing his kunai to the missing mist nin's neck. "You lose Zabuza," said a very wet and very pissed Kakashi. To his surprise though, all Zabuza did was laugh before saying, "You fool," instantly putting Kakashi on guard as the man dissolved into water and was put into a Suiro no Jutsu, water prison, within the seconds that followed. "Shit Kakashi, you really fucked up here. Get the children to run with the bridge builder and maybe they can escape," were the only thoughts that ran through Kakashi's mind when he was captured. Relaying his message to his genin cell, Kakashi found it shocking when they threw his, "Those who don't follow orders are trash, but those who desert family are worse than trash," and fought off Zabuza's Mizu Bunshin as they came ashore. Keying in on the man through the watery cell, Kakashi could hear Zabuza say, "You can't escape me. You will die just like your sensei here," before going off to spew about how he kicked his whole class to become genin. The reactions were predictable as Sakura bit back the bile coming out of her mouth, while her two teammates just suppressed their fear. Kakashi watched what looked like a lost cause when the blonde surprised him by destroying the clone with his new sword. Turning his gaze back to Zabuza, all Kakashi could think was, "Shit," when he saw the maniacal gleam in the mist swordsman's eyes. Getting a Mizu Bunshin to hold Kakashi's prison, Zabuza stepped forward before saying, "So we have a swordsman, come forth and let's see if that wooden toy isn't just for show." Cursing himself for bringing the sword, Naruto met the man's challenge and using some of his chakra control he learned from the elder Sasuke. Naruto made his way to where Zabuza was waiting. Sasuke stood in awe at his teammate's ability and was about to say something when he heard a tap. Instantly his mind raced and then he got his answer. Waiting for Naruto to disappear into the mist, the boy waited until he heard the second sign to complete the plan. Naruto knew he couldn't win this fight. Zabuza had years of training and was one of the legendary 7 mist swordsmen, and all Naruto had was a bit of practice swinging the sword as he got used to the weight. Wrapping his Jushu chakra around the sword, Naruto launched an air slash at Zabuza who dodged and went on the offensive. It was a one-sided from that point as Zabuza who was using a combination of taijutsu and kenjutsu to beat the boy into submission pummeled Naruto into submission. The best Naruto could hope for was that he could block all the sword slashes, and endure the painful shots to the body and face. It wasn't long before Zabuza got why, and as soon as that happened, Naruto struck. Slipping past one of the man's sloppier sword swings, Naruto let out a war cry that signaled Sasuke to attack while Naruto made an all-or-nothing slash on Zabuza. He missed and when Zabuza went in for the kill, Sasuke's Fuma Shuriken came into the scene. Jumping over the shuriken, Zabuza blocked the second one hiding in its shadow when he noticed the first one that had gotten past him and had just finished destroying the clone that was holding Kakashi. Watching the Kopinen come out of his prison ready for round 2, Zabuza couldn't help but think, "Oh shit," as Kakashi charged. Naruto managed to get back to his team, before collapsing onto the ground. Still conscious, he looked up at Sasuke before giving him a thumbs up and thinking, maybe he's not such a prick after all, before falling into a nice, peaceful sleep. Meanwhile Kakashi had Zabuza on the ropes, and while both of their Suiryuden no Jutsu, water release, water dragon blast, clashed, Kakashi passed Zabuza in hand seal speed making a Suiden, Daibakufu no Jutsu, water release, great waterfall, before the man, surprising the shit out of him before launching him into a nearby tree. Chasing after his fallen prey, Kakashi was about to go in for the kill, when several needles pinned Zabuza in the neck and a hunter nin appeared before stabbing Zabuza in the right side of his chest. Weird, Kakashi thought while bringing down his Hiat over his Sharingan, trying to preserve some chakra before he passed out. The hunter nin turned to Kakashi before saying, "My partner and I have been searching for Zabuza for months. Thanks to you, we were able to capture him today," and with that a shorter masked nin appeared, but unlike the first nin, this one had ebony hair opposed to the first one's ivory hair. "Thank you," the shorter dark-haired one said, before picking Zabuza up and disappearing in a swirl of leaves with his partner. "Damn, Zabuza got away," Kakashi said to himself before he ran out of energy and fell to the ground. The last thing he heard was Sakura rushing to him and Sasuke grumbling about having to carry both him and Naruto. It's like washing, read, review, and repeat. He was in the body again. The weird feeling of near-infinite chakra coursing through him was beginning to become normal, as Naruto looked at his surroundings. There were no blood-red skies of ancient Japanese castles this time. This time, Naruto was somewhere he could recognize. To his right was the forest where he practiced with the third and learned the basics of chakra control. In front of him was the lake he almost drowned in training to water walk and would have if the older man hadn't saved him before showing him the proper way to float over the water. However, as Naruto looked over the surroundings, going off his mental checklist of their importance, Naruto noticed something for the first time. He saw smoke. It was then that his body decided it was time for it to turn around. When it did so, Naruto saw something that shook his very core. Konoha was ablaze, and surrounding the fire were fallen shinobi killed in very gruesome manners. The blackish fires keep spreading, and despite Naruto's protests, his body would not even try to use some of its vast chakra to put out the fires. Instead he ignited more fire, while destroying even more shinobi in a crimson flash. Utter hopelessness set in, and Naruto just watched as his brothers in arms were killed by his hand. Why am I seeing this? Did I do this? Is this the reason I am hated? If so, I hate Mise. But Naruto's train of thought stopped when he saw something familiar to him in his dreams. The giant toad was back, and on him was a blonde-haired man with him in his arms. So it couldn't have been me who did this, Naruto realized while watching the fight. His body had Gamabunta restrained and was about to make a strike at the fourth when he saw the blonde Hokage smirk. The hand seals he had been doing since the start of the battle must have been completed, and with a leap, he saw the man come at himself with untraceable speed. When the fourth reappeared, he was shell of his former shell. The tanned skin he had gotten from countless hours of outside training was gone and replaced with a sick pale white, and the unmarred skin that proved his prowess in battle was now covered with countless runes. These runes were pulsating with chakra, and on closer inspection Naruto's, or whoever he was, mind concluded, Shinigami. A cold shiver went down Naruto as he felt all his omnipotent chakra being sucked into his natural body, but before he was completely gone, Naruto heard the Yondaime say, "Back to Makai with you, Kyuubi, we can finish our fight there," before he felt waves of darkness take over. The Kyuubi, the Yondaime, the Shinigami. These were the last things that went through Naruto's mind before the waves of darkness overtook his consciousness. "Got to get up," Naruto said while shaking the darkness in front of his eyes. With the dream still lingering in his mind, Naruto almost forgot how his battle ended. Instantly the calm demeanor faded and Naruto was on guard. 1. We were captured, and I am being kept alive to get answers or just to torture, or 2. We defeated Zabuza and the rest of this mission will be a breeze, Naruto concluded while waiting for his vision to adjust. Scanning the room with one eye, Naruto was about to let out a sigh when he caught Kakashi sitting in the corner of the room reading Icha Icha Paradise. Before Naruto could even think about what Kakashi may have been doing while he slept, the silver-haired ninja said, "I've just been here watching over you, Naruto," as if he could read the blonde's mind. "I'll figure out later if that's just his guilty conscience, or if he can just read minds," Naruto thought, swearing he heard Kakashi whisper, the latter, before the silvered-haired ninja just giggled like a pervert and dug deeper into his book. It didn't take long for an irritated Naruto to get up, working on sheer willpower to get away from the blatant pervert, but as soon as Naruto was about to reach the door, Kakashi stopped him. For Naruto, it was a first to see their untouchable sensei, stand in crutches, but it was even more shocking to see his serious expression. I want to thank you, Naruto. You really saved me out there, and for the past 3 days I worried if that had cost you your life, the masked nin said, looking at the boy in the eye, and for the first time, Naruto realized how much his action had impacted the mission. I really did all that. No, Kakashi would have found a way out and he would have done just fine, right? Naruto thought to himself while contemplating if what Kakashi said was true or not. Well, at least it's not going to his head, Kakashi said silently while thinking of another one of his less humble students. Looking down at his student's doubt, Kakashi decided to tease the boy a little in hopes that he would come to his senses. Well, Naruto, don't let it go to your head, but with you we may have died on this mission, Kakashi said, but before Naruto could even open his mouth, Kakashi continued, nevertheless, even with your help, Zabuza is still alive and I bet anything that he will be gunning for you just as much as he was for me in our last fight. Therefore, I prepared a surprise for you, Kakashi said while limping out the room, leaving Naruto to wonder, and what might that be? Sitting down to breakfast, Naruto noticed neither Sasuke nor Sakura were present, but really didn't care seeing as he had more pressing matters on his mind. What is it that Kakashi wants to see me about? Does he know of my dream already? No, that can't be it. He would have to use the Sharingan. No, it is something else, but what? Naruto thought while playing with his food. Eventually, he finished and went to the forest designated by his sensei, ready to find out what Kakashi's surprise was really about. When he entered the clearing, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Kakashi was reading his porn and his Sharingan was tucked safely behind his head, but before Naruto could make any more conclusions, Kakashi closed his little orange book and turned to Naruto. By the look in his eye, which was beyond serious, and Naruto's attention was completely on his sensei. Naruto, your actions in our encounter with Zabuza saved my life, but it also endangered yours. Zabuza will not underestimate you anymore and most likely will be gunning for you first before anyone else, save for myself, Kakashi said. As why as that sounds, I know it's true, Naruto thought while looking intently at his sensei. Zabuza would go for the strongest links in the chain before picking off the weaker ones, and that chain started with Kakashi. Letting what he said sink in, Kakashi then roused Naruto from his thoughts by saying, so that is why you are going to have to be stronger than the rest. Okay, that's a change after all the attention he showers the Uchiha with. I wonder if the ass-whopping Zabuza gave him knocked some sense into him. Naruto wondered while recalling all the times Sasuke got some extra practice after Kakashi dismissed both him and Sakura. The pink-haired girl never minded, because she trained with Kunai and Hinata in Genjutsu, and the fact that it was Uchiha Sasuke getting the attention. Naruto on the other hand was pissed beyond belief. Not only was it favoritism, but it also went against Kakashi's worse than trash speech. Kakashi, sensing Naruto's thoughts and surprise, chuckled a bit before saying, Naruto, you are powerful, unnaturally powerful for a child your age, and have managed to gain that power by yourself with only someone to point you in the right direction. I know I have been paying much more attention to Sasuke, but that is because he has never earned his power, but just takes from others, like most of his clan. Kakashi said, pausing while a far-off look covered his eyes. This caused Naruto to wonder, what could affect Kakashi this much other than Icha paradise? Naruto wondered while Kakashi came back to the living world. Kakashi shook his head a little before continuing with his speech. But you, Naruto, you learned on your own, and it would be a waste for me as a teacher to make you become reliant on me as a teacher. Therefore, this is why I will point you in the right direction as Hokage-sama did before me. Hopefully you will work some of your magic and come up with something to help us in this next battle, Kakashi finished before standing up. Watching as Kakashi fumbled with his crutches, Naruto thought to himself, I guess that makes sense, but then why does he still baby Sasuke? Decided to save that conversation for later, Naruto just shook his head and watched Kakashi stand before him crutchless. Now, I will show you what separates Genin from Jonin, Kakashi said before a strained look crossed his face. Naruto was watching patiently, and when nothing happened he was about to ask Kakashi what he was doing when the copy nin spoke out. Come at me, Naruto. If you can hit me once, then you will be ready for the next step. Naruto made no outward response to Kakashi's words, but in his head he was ranting, not another test. Damn, he's seen most of my techniques already, so surprise is out. How can I land a hit? Naruto thought before making a clone and switching with it while it charged Kakashi. When the two clashed, Kakashi didn't bat an eyelash as usual, but instead of the clone missing a punch and swiftly destroyed, it looked as if it ran straight into a bug zapper. How did he do that? Kakashi didn't even move and my clone was destroyed. Is this what he's talking about, the power of a Jonin? Naruto thought while trying to formulate a plan to get past Kakashi's newly dubbed clone zapper. So far he was coming up blank, and any way his clones came at him they would be destroyed, where it was underground or over it. Naruto was about to pull out the big guns when Kakashi spoke up. Naruto, you just have to land one hit and we can proceed. I'd hurry though because this part is the easiest and Zabuza will probably be ready to fight within 2 weeks, Kakashi said while reading his book. Shit, I need to hit him now, but how? He zaps clones and by the looks of it I won't be getting anywhere near him to use chakra shaku, Dengeki or anything taijutsu related. Therefore, it's long range I need, but he's already seen chakra shaku, Tama. No, I need something new and original, something he wouldn't expect me to do. Naruto thought before a wicked grin crossed his face. He's expected me to think Naruto-like, but I wonder what would happen if I did something that had Sasuke written all over it? Naruto thought before jumping from his hiding spot along with about dozen other clones he was using to throw off Kakashi's perception on where he was. Kakashi didn't look worried though, he was confident his electrical field would stop the boy, and he was right. But what Kakashi didn't realize was that the real Naruto was in his blind spot and landed just as his clones hit the barrier. Let's see, how much of a pounding can this barrier can take? Naruto asked to no one in particular before unleashing his chakra shaku. Feeling Naruto's chakra spike, Kakashi turned around so see Naruto preparing to fire off a chakra shaku. Tama shot when something changed. Instead of one shot firing, the chakra in the center of the pentacle shot out across the 5 wisps of chakra that made the weaver, before launching from the ends of those. Now Kakashi was in a dilemma, either he could try and dodge this new jutsu, but his gut told him that Naruto had already accounted for that, or he could hope that his barrier was strong enough to hold all 5 of the shots. I guess there's only one way to find out, Kakashi concluded before taking the attack head-on, but instead of reading his book like the last times, Kakashi was actually concentrating on defending. The blue lightning darted in all directions trying to hold off Naruto's orbs of chakra, and it looked like Kakashi was going to win when the orbs suddenly popped. Looking at the dumbstruck Naruto, Kakashi figured that the attack was over. And good thing too, otherwise, I may have ended back up in the bedroom trying to wiggle my big toe. 1. Kakashi thought before trying to start his barrier again, when felt something tap his shoulder. Turning around to see Naruto with a chakra shaku, Dengeki primed and ready, Kakashi smirked under his mask before saying, well, it seems you are ready. It was really cunning to use a new technique in the middle of a battle, knowing that your opponent had planned all your moves. It was stupid on my part to underestimate you, but risky on yours if it hadn't worked where you would be caught in my lightning web. Kakashi said, breaking down all the mini lessons that they had gone through. Nodding, Naruto absorbed what Kakashi was saying before the silver-haired nin continued. One question though, where did you come up with the idea for that jutsu? Kakashi asked and was surprised to find out that Naruto used Sasuke's Housenka no Jutsu, Phoenix Fireflower, as a basis for the multiple shots. Nodding at his student's ingenuity, Kakashi decided that wasn't too bad. Chakra Shaku. Gorogoro, Chakra Weaver. Scatter, I like it, before moving on to the real lesson. Okay Naruto, now that you have seen the strength of a Jonin, I need you to understand what you saw. What I just did was element manipulation, which is the usage of chakra to control one of the natural 5 elements: fire, water, earth, lightning, and wind. I am naturally predisposed to lightning, so that is why I can mold lightning jutsu out of pure chakra with hand seals. You, on the other hand, are air. Kakashi said before explaining to Naruto what that meant. Your element is brutishly strong, while at the same time fast as lightning. So what I want you to do is to incorporate your wind element into your kenjutsu, seeing as it is already in your taijutsu, Kakashi said while watching Naruto closely. Confusion played clearly on his face, and for the first time, it looked as if Naruto was presented a question he didn't know the answer to. So HW, do I do this? The blonde asked, causing Kakashi to smack himself, forgot to give him an example, while pulling deep into his chakra reserves. Okay Naruto, I only have enough chakra to do this once, so pay attention. With that being said, Kakashi's face fell back into the strained look as the air began to crackle madly around him. His chakra became visible as blue lighting began to form, before becoming an off-white color. This is element manipulation. You are using your chakra to mimic the elements around you. For me, I think of my chakra as lightning dashing quickly from one spot to the next, and that helps me gain the control I need over lightning. For you and Asuma, the Hokage-sama's son and fellow Jonin, told me that when he uses his wind manipulation that he thinks of the wind as a sharpener around his trench knives. So maybe that will help you, Kakashi said while disengaging his electrical field and sitting down on the conveniently placed patch of grass under him. So sharpening your weapon with the wind, gotcha, Naruto muttered while pulling his Jushu chakra. If the element manipulation was really what he was doing this whole time with his Kenshoken, then maybe this would be easier than he thought. 3 days later. Okay, not as easy as I thought, Naruto said to himself while trying to get his chakra to form at his will. The wind-based training had been going well, according to Kakashi, but for Naruto all he had been doing was making a fool of himself. The wind element didn't take as much chakra control as something like water, but the grasp Naruto needed over his chakra was greater than what he had. Naruto figured it had to be the Kyuubi's chakra inside him making it hard, seeing as it alone made up 99% of his chakra, which just about 2% of that was usable. Even then that chakra was more than enough to double Kakashi's chakra reserves along with Sasuke's and Sakura's combined. Pulling the chakra in the circle, Naruto abandoned the idea of sharpening his weapon with chakra for now and was just trying to do simple circle motions he had seen the wind do while making whirlwinds and hurricanes. So far he was having little success, seeing as all he could muster was a small gale spinning around him that wouldn't even deter a kunai if thrown at him. Therefore, after about a day Kakashi had Naruto go tree climbing with his team to focus his chakra before trying, in private, with him to master element manipulation. This is too easy, Naruto thought to himself while running up and down his tree, trying to focus his control to a finer point. Kakashi suggested walking on kunai if that was too easy, so Naruto jabbed his whole stock of kunai into the tree with points sticking out to get a better exercise. Needless to say, Sasuke was pissed that Naruto not only could literally run circles around him in tree climbing, but was onto a harder and more complex method, and it looked like he would get that before he even finished normal tree climbing. Why am I so weak? I will never kill him if I can't even climb this tree, Sasuke said to himself while running toward the tree again. Only this time he didn't go higher, but instead was launched off the tree a whole 5 feet shorter than his last attempt. What? Sasuke ranted, getting angrier by the second as he seemed to only get worse. Sakura watched from his branch with a bit of pity in her eye but remained quiet after what happened the first time she tried to help. Sasuke told her to go somewhere and don't hold him back. Pouting a bit, Sakura just watched while saying to herself, I'll wait until he has sulked a bit until I help, before making her way down and back up again, too. A week later, Sasuke had finally gotten tree climbing down, and with that complete, he was demanding Kakashi to teach him more jutsu, which left Naruto in a pickle, for without Kakashi to constantly supervise his training, Naruto fell back on what he saw wind do naturally. With that, Naruto had gotten the pushing out and drawing in force of the wind, and with that he could speed up kunai flying in the air, slow them down, and with a bit more chakra control, its flight. Now, Naruto was moving on to more useful abilities like making a shield from his chakra. So far the only way I can get enough spin to block an attack is by moving my hand while I'm manipulating chakra. Let's see if it's good enough, Naruto thought to himself while summoning a few shadow clones. Each clone was holding a kunai and without warning, they attacked. The 4 kunai closed in on Naruto faster than normal. Seems as if the clones are using wind manipulation too. Good, I need all the practice I can get, Naruto said to himself while making a large full circle in the air and deflecting the kunai. The process wasn't perfect, but it got the job done, and Naruto was eager to see how well he could use his defensive abilities. With a poof, 20 clones appeared and Naruto smirked. This should do for now, Naruto thought to himself before his smirk spread to a wicked grin and he started deflecting the blows left and right. 3 days later, it had almost been 2 weeks from their encounter with Zabuza, and Kakashi couldn't help but think, are we ready? That one little question caused more gray hairs to appear on Kakashi's already silver head. Not like anyone notices, right? Kakashi thought to himself before getting back to the task. Sasuke had grown much during the 13 days they had been here. With a bit more control, he could start the boy on element manipulation. But without the control, Sasuke was likely to end up burning himself to cinders if he started now. Our hope rests with you, Naruto, Kakashi said to himself, before drilling more tips into the Uchiha's head on how to use Kaden. Ryuka no Jutsu, Fire Release, Dragon Fire Technique. Nodding, Sasuke went back to burning more tree trunks while Kakashi's shadow clone checked in on Sakura. The girl's progress was staggering, at least for the one who would be considered the weak link. I guess Sakura took it upon herself not to slow the team down. Good, we need more kunoichi like her, Kakashi said to himself while watching the effects of her genjutsu with his Sharingan eye. Like most genjutsu, hers was invisible to all, except those with special dojutsu. But unlike most, Sakura was far more advanced with her genjutsu. Watching with transfixed fascination, Kakashi saw Sakura disappear, before reappearing at a nearby tree and making a slash through the air. Nothing spectacular, to the untrained or Sharingan-ed eye, that is. Was that Kunare's Magen? Jubaku Satsu, demonic illusion? Tree-bind death? Kakashi thought with alarm. For a genin handle such an advanced technique was alarming, and what made matters worse was that Kakashi knew he hadn't taught her anything and this skill was the work from another. Maybe I should take my own advice and stop playing favorites, Kakashi thought before going to check up on his last student. When Kakashi arrived, he immediately noticed something was off. Then again, gashes in the ground and turned over trees tend to draw suspicion. Following the path of destruction, Kakashi found himself at a cliff overlooking the small town. And that's where Naruto was training, with about 100 clones. 3. Kakashi watched as his blonde student used his element manipulation to block kunai in mid-air, launch the weapons back at the clones circling him, and make air's lashes, in the same way he did in Zabuza's fight. Wow, who would have guessed that a student could go this far on their own, Kakashi thought while reminiscing back to the small hints he gave Naruto. Flashback. Kage Bunshin helps speed up the process, and remember, try to find a way to wrap your mind on how your element works, was all Kakashi said before going to train Sasuke and left Naruto standing with a contemplative scowl on his face, thinking of ways to wrap his mind around his element. End flashback. Wow, that wasn't much at all, Kakashi said to himself, while watching the shadow clones dwindle around Naruto until it was one-on-one. Judging by the clone's appearance, it was in charge of his fallen brethren and he was able to take more than one blow unlike the other shadow clones. He can reinforce his clones already. Kakashi thought, remembering the only man who could sustain the constant strain of sending chakra to clones and keeping them reinforced. Maybe a little of the 4Th's legacy was imparted to Naruto when he sealed the Kyuubi's chakra inside the boy, Kakashi concluded while watching the fight draw out to its last seconds. Naruto had just jumped over the last shuriken that the clone had and used his Jushu chakra with his elemental manipulation to catch the projectiles and launch it back at the boss clone, Taisho Bunshin, who just whirled some of his Jushu chakra around and created a barrier like the one Naruto had done earlier to deflect the flying blades. Landing, Naruto positioned himself in his makeshift sword stance he had grown comfortable with using. Over the 2 weeks, Naruto had gone from a clumsy fool with a sword to a wannabe mist samurai after going through countless ambushes by his clones, and learning to be much more graceful with his sword. It's a start, Kakashi said to himself while thinking of a few people he could unload Naruto off to who was able to teach him a few things about swordplay. Turning back to the battle, Kakashi heard Naruto yell, Teshirai, Kukagiri, Air Raid, Air Slash, and Kakashi watched as the clone did the same. The effect was instant as two bands of concentrated chakra left their wooden swords and met in midair. The clash went on for minutes until the real Naruto's attack finally won over and cut the clone in two. Looking at the floating clone with a smirk, Naruto saw it return the gesture before he fell to his knees. That took up way too much chakra, Naruto complained to himself before trying to think of a way to reduce the chakra needed to make the Teshirai, Kukagiri. However, before he could get any farther in his thoughts, Kakashi appeared. I see you have come a long way in your element manipulation, Naruto, Kakashi said, trying to break the ice. Inside the Jonin was a big guilty for neglecting two of his students in favor of one, but it had to be done. Sasuke must know how to protect the Sharingan, Kakashi said to himself while looking down at the boy. Naruto was a bit pissed now that Kakashi wanted to show up when he didn't need his help, and Naruto let it show by saying, "Yeah, no thanks to you, Kakashi-sensei," while paying special interest to his so-called sensei's name. "I guess I deserve that," Kakashi told himself before trying to continue his intended conversation. "Zabuza will be ready for a rematch soon, so be ready and watch your back when I'm not around," Kakashi said before leaving. Staring at the spot where Kakashi poofed away, Naruto said to himself, "When are you ever around, Kakashi?" before taking a well-deserved break. The next day, Naruto woke up to hear Tsunami yell, "Inari, stay back." Jumping out of bed, Naruto grabbed his wooden katana, before making his way out the window and onto the roof. Looking down on the scene, Naruto's mind began sorting through the options: hostage situation, 2 thugs, and 1 whiny brat. Naruto said to himself, remembering his argument with Inari over if he should fight or die. "Fight, of course," Naruto said before hopping down from his hiding place and landing soundlessly onto the ground below. Stalking around his prey, Naruto waited for Inari to attack, and when the boy did, Naruto quickly did Kawarimi to trade places with the boy before meeting swords with the samurai, who were so shocked at the change that they didn't sense his Taisho Bunshin, boss clone, behind them, until it was too late. Now with 2 hostages tied up to one of the frames on the house, Naruto left Inari and Tsunami and raced toward the bridge, hoping he wasn't too late. The bad omen Naruto felt only got worse, when Naruto saw the thick mist rolling over the bridge. "Shit, I'm late," Naruto said, berating himself for sleeping in. "I hope that I can make it in time," Naruto thought to himself while making his way to where he felt his Jushu chakra brush up against Sasuke's and Sakura's. However, on the way there he felt something that was very wrong. Sasuke's chakra was too large, but then again maybe it wasn't Sasuke's chakra. Making his way farther into the mist, Naruto reached where Sasuke's chakra was the strongest, and when he noticed that he was in the wrong place it was already too late. "Kimimaro of the Kagaya clan," said a monotone voice before a white flash caught Naruto's eye. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.